back in. Joe, why
Come
is
on.
it Scriv?
Nobody,
Joe Scrivener.
yeah.
Joe Scrivener.
Yeah.
Welcome to H Hour. Welcome to H Hour. If you were joining us, fresh off the back of the Icebreaker that you just listened to, cool. If you're not, then I suggest you go back and listen to the Icebreaker. However, so we're going to talk about the siege of Musa Qaleh. This is going to be, I think, the first long form podcast which is specifically about that siege, of which you and I are both involved. However, what I want to do is I don't want this to be a you and me batting memories of each other and it shit listening for people. Yeah. And as you quite rightly pointed out, and the reason actually, one of the reasons you asked to come and do this is because we got two entirely different perspectives and memories of things. We had two entirely different roles. We were at different levels in the hierarchy. Like I was Joe Bag to you, and you were not, and you were a Sergeant Major. And the passage of time, I think, impacts the things you remember. If I can, Scriv, it's all right. If you can start by explaining how that the situation came about, whereby we were in that siege in the first place. Is that all right?
No. So I think if I start off with how I sort of got there, and in that how it did. So as I mentioned just earlier, I'd been away on tour, away from 3 Para for 2 years over. I was away jungle warfare instructor, colour sergeant, so one rank below the one I'd just been promoted into. So came back into 3 Para, had missed all the pre-deployment training. I hadn't gone to Oman, didn't really know. I knew people from 2 years ago, but it was a whole fresh and different CO, everything like that. So I was posted back in about the May, and I think we literally deployed straight away. So I moved my family back from abroad, landed, and then said goodbye and went off. I'd heard rumours that we were going to go, 3 Para were going to go to Afghanistan, come back, hit the ground, straight into it. And I hadn't, because I was posted back in, my job as a newly promoted sergeant major was Ops 1 officer, looking after the ops room as that sort of senior warrant officer. And I did that for a couple of months. And then suddenly, as you know, 3 Para were being stretched through no one's fault, just really trying to occupy ground that we didn't have the combat power for.
Why do you think we were trying to do that, though? This is a big bone of contention about that tour, right? So why did we stretch ourselves too thin? Yeah, I mean, the irony of it is it sounds like it's the bridge too far.
Yeah, it was.
Back to the foot.
So my own personal reflection is we couldn't let these district centres fall to the Taliban. So we had to. So Sangin, Musa Qaleh, Guresh, which wouldn't really have fallen because that was near a Highway 1.
I suppose the optics of it would be terrible.
Yeah, and that's all it was. We were there to support the government of Afghanistan. If a district centre all along, the Helmand River began to fall and begin to topple, it looks terrible. We were there to support them. So, if you remember, we went in to, reassure, give out rations, reconstruct, that kind of stuff. Quite quickly, it became kinetic. But I say quickly because you remember there wasn't a contact for the first 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Probably more.
It was 6 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, there was nothing, absolutely nothing.
It happened just before the first leave rotation.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. And you're looking back now, thinking how it ended and how it started, there was nothing. It was quiet as you like. We were patrolling, we were doing all the reconstruction work, all the stuff we had gone in, and then suddenly I equate it to poking a hornet's nest. We began to get into that backyard. We went into Sangin, went into Nowzad, withholding forces. That was poking, the hornet's nest, and then they came out fighting, and then we were stuck. Once you're there, you can't let a district centre fall. And then we at Musa Qaleh were almost the end of that chain. It was the longest one away from, apart from Kajaki, which is probably about equally distance from Bastion.
Well, Musa Qaleh was the furthest up the valley, right? The Sangin Valley was
top of the valley,
the northernmost.
Yeah,
right,
sort of away from Bastion, Highway 1. It was the most northerly one. Through hook or by crook, probably the worst place to be. Probably an hour's flight, 50 minutes, flat out, which had its own, and we'll probably talk about that later on. We just, by hook or by crook, and through really no fault of tactics, we just ended up being where we were. And as a battle group, overstretched. We didn't have enough combat power, and a lot of the time we were just holding the immediate surrounds of the district centres, and just that's how it was. And when you look at when we sort of in my last tour, 2010, 2011, we were just holding a much smaller area. The US Marines had gone into the Sangin and were holding it with probably 10 times the amount of combat power that we originally started off. So you can see how it just absorbs troops. We just didn't have it, at the time. But it doesn't. It has no effect on me. It doesn't bother me one little bit, and I don't blame anyone. It's just how it happened. I can see it in my head how it trips out. And actually, perversely, paratroopers, 3-para, you're supposed to be surrounded. You're supposed to be hard pressed. I didn't bat an eyelid. I thought, this is probably normal business. You look back to, I'm not equating it to Arnhem, but you look back to those kind of battles when you're fighting against the odds, and that's what it's all about. And actually holding your own and holding more than your own. That I think we did. I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah, I am. I can't speak for other units or anything. I'm not, so I don't know if this is particular to Power Edge, and it probably isn't. But it's something I've carried forward with me now, is that immense pride in my ability to take immense levels of pressure. Now, some types of pressure I am not great at handling. I'm talking about normal life stuff, like relationship pressures and stuff. I've been through divorce and things, and some of that has nearly broken me. And yet everything that we did in the past, nothing. I literally feel like I can take anything like that. Just keep coming. I'll take as much as I can. I'll take as much until my luck runs out. But I want it to be luck runs out, and not and not that I'm not able to cope with it. I agree with you, and I think anyone worth their salt needs to think like that.
And I think the people that don't think like that end up in trouble. I think. And that's how I dealt with it. And it sounds like how you deal with it before. So when I did, I don't know, God knows, say 7 tours of Northern Ireland, totally different. You haven't got that same threat. But then we did Iraq, which we thought was a high threat. And then you got the chemical weapons side. And then you ended up doing sort of 3 tours of Afghan. As I left, my family left the UK, I just shuttered myself down. And it was game face on. This is my job. And I think if you let other stuff distract you, that's when you come a cropper. If you're in the middle of a firefight and you start thinking, oh, what if I die and I leave my, children, with their father dead? I think that muddies the water.
But I think the people most susceptible to that are the people who have less responsibility in their job in the military, right? And so where we're concerned, I mean privates.
Yeah.
They've got they've got a responsibility to their team, to the unit, to their mucker, to do what they're being told, but they don't have the additional responsibility of looking after their own men, soldiers, paratroopers, right? And I think that makes it harder for Toms, privates, to shut out that fear side, to shut out that other noise, right? It makes it harder for them to focus. They still do. And it's very few that don't, but I think it's easier for commanders to be able to zone in on that. I'm completely because we haven't got a choice.
No, you have to do it.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do your job properly, you have to do it. Nothing else needs to get in the way. And the blinkers come on, and they should stay on for the entire thing. The problem, as you know, and the problem as I know is, as I experienced thinking back, those blinkers stay on when you come back, and that's a real fucking issue. A real issue.
No, and I think we'll probably go on to that. But you're right. You've got the responsibility, and in Musa Qaleh, and I say this very carefully, as the Sergeant Major, yes, they're all my guys, but because we had a mix of Cat Badgers, Royal Irish, who were exceptional, never ever, I didn't know them. I know you. I knew the parachute regiment element of it. You've been in my company. We'd known each other for years, so I'm emotionally attached to you. And I'm more, because that's the way it is. You're one of my guys. It was easier, and the deaths of the Royal Irish didn't affect me because ultimately, yes, they were my guys in that time and space, but I didn't know them for a length of time. So me personally, and being selfishly, I could box it up. And yes, it's horrible, and we talk about that kind of stuff. It's absolutely horrible, especially in some of the ways they died. But I could, put it in a compartment and box it away because I didn't know them. I didn't know their families. You know, I knew of you. I knew your families. I knew all that kind of stuff. It makes it harder. So perversely, it was easier to be that. But you're right. As when you're in command and in charge of people, there's more responsibility. But ultimately, your time is filled with a lot more stuff to keep you, you know, on track. And I never found that my stuff, I wandered, you know, too much. It was game face on. Yeah.
It was all consuming though, wasn't it? It was all consuming, wasn't it? It was like there was no getting away from it.
No. And that's the difference doctrinally. What a full screw would do, sergeant would do, what a sergeant major would do. Musa Qaleh threw that all out the window. You know, some of the stuff I did as a sergeant major, which you probably won't go into, is you shouldn't be doing. But combat power-wise, you know, when we'd taken a lot of casualties, actually every man needed to be able to fight and do some, you know, silly things and whatever, and do things that normally an OC, a sergeant major, a sergeant wouldn't do. You know, it was all encompassing 360 war, pressure, all that stuff, you know, which we'll go on to, you know, different. And that's why it's unique, absolutely unique, I think.
Yeah. So so you would have been in Bastion then when you were told about Musa Qaleh that you were going. So
yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes and no. So the whole of that Afghan tour, and, you know, take ourselves back, I've not spoken about this, not through anything. I still served. I'm still in the MOD now. And you go one thing to another. You're always busy. You don't have time to stop, reflect. You're on to the next thing, next exercise. 16 Brigade, where we were, is just a mad organisation that just, you know, it does a lot of stuff. And so you don't have time and space really to stop and think. It's only when I've sort of moved on from that into a different part of the Ministry of Defence, I've had time to look back. And actually, it's been good for me, you know, to actually look back. And when we were discussing whether we were going to chat about Musa Qaleh and stuff, because naturally I'm an introverted person. It doesn't come naturally, you know, for me to come out and talk like this. You know, it's easier because I know you. I'm not sure I'd do that with someone else and I trust you. I would, you know, it's not naturally me. So it's hard for me to do. But actually going through and unpicking what I think happened in Musa Qaleh, because it's just a big blur day to day. It was just mad, wasn't it? And you look back, it's absolutely surreal. You know, we're sat in this room in London to look back at that time and try and unpack it all. It's mad. And I chronologically wrote down stuff. I reread Adam's book. I spoke to a few people.
Oh, what, ready for this?
Yeah, and then just to see.
Oh, in general.
Because
okay,
if you said to me, when did you get fragged on top of the island? I couldn't give you a date off the top of my head. I knew it happened because it was there, you know, and you're probably the same. I knew it happened, and I knew at that time, I think we had 8 casualties. You know, that's a horrific incident. Time, day, I would struggle unless I read that book. And so it's good for me to unpack that. So I was in the ops room and I can remember, like, we need to 3 power battle group, the British Army need to secure Musa Qaleh because the Danes were in there, Pathfinders before them. The Danish government didn't have the appetite to lose anyone. They'd had someone shot in the head by a sniper, if you remember. That was the final straw. And they said, look, we politically, you know, we can't take a casualty at this moment, right or wrong. So they needed to be pulled out. So we had to generate another company. You know, I think it was 62 people or whatever, you know, plus the Royal Irish that were already there. You know, you're like, okay, we're about 50 under strength there from a normal company. And then they're like, we need an OC, we need a sergeant major. And it was like, who was left? Okay, you know, so there was rumours. And the CO at the time said, right, Scriv, you know, you're the man. You know, you're the only man, you know, it's not, you're the only Scriv left, not that you're the best, you're the only one left. Go and do it. I mean, we had that, you know, in the icebreaker, just like, no one ever teaches you that. You know, you don't do a course for sergeant major. I think the army is the only sort of profession that promotes someone into a job that they're not actually doing. So you think as a colour man, colour sergeant, you're either colour sergeant instructor or you're in the stores. You get promoted into a job as a sergeant major. So you might be the best colour man ever at running your stores. You're now in as a sergeant major, which has got no stores, no nothing. It's weird. It's called the something effect. You know, so you're put into a job yes, by experience and being around, you know how it works, but no one ever trains you to do that. And then you go into Musa Qaleh, absolute extreme, to that. So that when I stepped off, we did the pre-admin to get easy company together. So that was my first company sergeant major bit. Was that 2-3 days? I don't know. You may remember more me, but I remember just going around nicking as much ammo and nicking as much stuff as I could.
I can barely remember.
Yeah.
I only remember being told, but where I was in the scoff house.
Yeah.
I was in scoff. I'm pretty sure I got it real short notice, mate.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was super short notice. I got told on the same day we left. I'm sure it was that short.
No, I don't know. In my head, and I think I picked it up in the operations room slightly earlier because that discussions when I was involved in the orders and that kind of stuff and the planning started going. So I might have known slightly earlier. I think you're right with who can we have? We need a sniper deck. We need this was thing. But in my head, it was sort of like 36, 48 hours, I think. But that might be wrong. But yeah, but
you would have known ahead of time, further ahead than me anyway.
Just because of that rank. Yeah, no, exactly. And then, it evolved in trying to pull people together. But really, the first time I was a company sergeant major doing the job was when I stepped off that the Chinook in the middle of the Wild West, and then no one ever trained you for that. And you just cuffed it, winged it, whatever I did, it's not for me to judge whether I did it right or not, but you're winging it but you're using the experience. By that stage I was 32, probably been around for a while, seen a bit of shit, but it's strange looking back now. I just think, whatever.
As I recall, we got off the Chinook. It was dusk-ish.
Yeah,
it was dusk, wasn't it? Maybe just before dusk. And came in.
It's strange, I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. And the reason I say
it was early morning start.
The reason I say it was dusk when we got off because I'd not long got into being given the room that me and Jared were staying in.
Yeah,
that I think you had given me next to the ops room, and I think it was minutes later that like a complex attack occurred outside, and it was by that point it was dark.
Yeah, no, I think you're
right. And it was
right.
just after we arrived. Yeah, and a dusk insertion makes sense as well.
Yeah, and it's just because the Danish were still there. And they were 150, 170 people with armored Humvees. Yeah, and this is this is the quandary. You're replacing. I think our company strength was about 88-ish. Replacing a company strength of 150 to 180, something in that, with God knows how many armored vehicles, 50 calibers on top. And you look in, and you do the maths in your head. And it's that conversation we had earlier on, you're just like, okay, that doesn't really add up. If you're doing the combat estimate, you're like, okay.
They left us a quad bike with a couple of punches.
Yeah,
they left us a quad bike with a couple of punches.
I'm not sure if you remember, or you were involved in these conversations, but we were like begging them, because we only had 150 cal, maybe 2, probably 1, I think. We were saying, can you leave us a 50 cal? And they were like, no, these are our, because they would have taken them off the vehicles. I get it, and it's not slagging anyone. But, you're like, okay, you've got 20 50 calibers, I've got 1, we've got 1. That doesn't add up, and can you leave us that? Can you leave it? And they did leave us some kit, including ammunition. Thankfully, left us a generator, left us a lot of stuff, but actually weapons wise we're pretty limited. And if you remember, we can only bring in what we bought on the Chinook, which was overloaded as it was. Everyone had full kit, much ammo, all that stuff. That initial part in Bastion, I can remember the Sergeant Major was like, what do we need? And strangely enough, my mind always goes back to body bags. How many body bags do I need to take in? And you're like, no one should be asking that question, but you do, you have to. And mine was 6, and I don't know where I got that figure from. And ultimately that was wildly wrong. I could have taken in 15 and more and used them all, and that's really horrible to say. But I scrounged 6 body bags thinking, that's enough. I mean, because and it's how you were sat here now, the surrealness of it all, and Sergeant Major, you never want to put any one of your own lads in a body bag, and it never crossed my mind that I would, but you prepare, don't you? So I remember, much to the OC's, his strength of character, he said, I need the best doctor with all the skills, and he got him. Mike Stacey was just
What a fucking legend.
what a bloke.
Mike Stacey, what a legend.
Yeah,
100%. What a guy.
And ultimately saved
And the medics.
saved a lot. Yeah.
Frenchie and
I wouldn't
Robbo.
say Frenchie, but you know.
Well, he's got good looks.
Yeah. But ultimately, the OC said, we are dislocated. We're furthest away from Bastion. I need the best doctor. And they did it, and he brought in, but it's only the med kit we could bring in on the Chinook. It limited, when you look back at the pictures of the med centre, it's just scary, isn't it?
The butcher room.
Yeah, it was, but ultimately we had, and by hook or by crook, we formed a company group that was full of good people, whatever cat badge. And I never ever go into cat badge politics. It's fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? The lads we had were decent blokes, very good at what they did under extreme pressure. Probably the most, it's difficult to judge because I never did anyone else's tour, but the pressure those guys were under in that compound is next level. It's scary, next level. And I always say, that private soldier was in that sentry position. He could see some of them 8 foot away. That was his arc, 8 foot away. And quite often, the Taliban would jump out 8 foot away when you don't know when, you don't know where. That's that private soldier responsibility and the pressure. It's not like you can see for 3K and you can see anyone coming with your thermal. That wasn't it. It was up close, hideously violent.
It was that combined with the knowledge or the lack of knowledge, because that private soldier didn't know when they were leaving. We don't know.
No.
We cannot leave. Like, it's knowing that we can't get out right now. We don't know when we're going to be when we're going to get out. Literally, no end date.
No.
It wasn't like, you're here for a couple of weeks. It's like, no. And I remember getting to the month point, like the month point for me, for us, and thinking, you're going to, because there was talk about getting out after a month. No. We're going to be here for at least another month. Yeah. Maybe, don't know.
Yeah. And I suppose when you look at it with Sergeant Major's hat on, Sergeant Major, of the company, and I know me and the OC had long chats about that, is that moral component because golden hour, so that means you would be back in the hospital at Bastion.
If you're injured, yeah.
If you were injured within an hour. When you can't guarantee your guys that's going to be the case by hook or by crook, there's some guys were, T1, the worst injured.
Muirhead, T1, 13 hours, is it not?
And the guy that got hit in the throat, Masinga.
Was it Max?
Yeah.
Draver. No, Draver died.
No, he died. Yeah, I think it's Masinga.
Max, someone with the throat. Got his throat cut open.
T1 with a massive bit of shrapnel in his throat that had to sit there as a T1 casualty with golden hour because the helicopter was was going to get shot down. There was no doubt if we'd have called him in without the control, it would. So, but how do you say that to a young private soldier who's been promised? That's where your command and your leadership comes in and says, "We've got you." But however, we need to, and that plays back to what you do. And me and the OC spoke about it for hours about how do you keep morale up? Because once you lose hope, is if I get wounded, I'm not getting out of here. It's very dangerous, and trying to keep that. And luckily, and we did. And then perhaps you wouldn't have seen it, but there was people there that had total mental breakdown. Serving soldiers, interpreter you probably would have seen.
The chirp I know about.
And you joke about it. Looking back now, again, it's that surreal moment. But you see a young lad have a total mental breakdown through no fault of his own. It's that World War I pressure, shell shock, PTSD happening right on top of him. He's seen his best friend killed, best friend wounded, and then you ask him to go back into that same Sanger with an arc of 8 foot where a Taliban could jump out on him and fire something. That mental pressure is,
Yeah, I didn't know about any of that, actually.
And I think at the time, and I would never, I can't honestly remember names, and it's not fair to do because people handle pressure differently. But what I do know is that those people that had them wobbles, call it that, then stepped up and then performed magnificently. Everyone performed magnificently. There's no one that I would ever call out for not doing a job, and I don't think you would. It was just because you had to. There's no other choice. But you've got to recognise in that time and space, it affected people differently. And it's always that golf club effect. To play golf, you need all the different sticks. clubs to do it. You need a driver, you need a putter. Leadership in that extreme, how I see it, is you pull out the right club at the right time. You know, if you pull out a driver to try and putt something, it's not going to do. Some people need arm around their shoulder. Some people need throttling, smacking, whatever. That's the skill of it, and recognizing who needs what at what time. And does it matter if he's crying in a sanger? No, no one else needs to know. You know, that's between me, him, whoever else was there, as long as he can do his job the next day. And, you know, that recognizing that extreme pressure, it's quite sobering, you know, what you've seen. And, you know,
I don't think I ever saw anyone on the 3 Afghan tours. I don't recall ever seeing anyone have a breakdown like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying people didn't. No. I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And the point I'm trying to make with that is like, I don't know what that demonstrates. I don't know if it demonstrates like the amazing, like how effective our training of soldiers is in general. Because you talk about the Royal Air Share or the Power Edge. I don't know if it demonstrates how effective the training is, how effective the preparation for the tours are, or just how resilient like human beings are in general. Yeah. Because by rights, you know, there are things that Musa Qaleh is one example, right? Probably the most extreme example. There's loads of other stuff, loads of other things that other people did, and I don't think I ever saw everyone have a breakdown. No. I did see someone. You may not know about this actually. I won't mention a name, but he had a very near miss. It was on the same tour. He had a very near miss with a recoilless rifle. Him and 2 other guys in a shell scrape, Kajaki, and they nearly got very seriously injured or killed. Yeah. And I think there were 3 of them in the shell scrape. 2 of them, fucking hell, that was close and cracked on. Yeah. The 3rd guy, he lost the power of speech. Yeah. Literally lost the power of speech, became basically a temporary mute. Yeah. You would describe it as shell shock, right? He was just shell shock. And he had to get cancelled.
That's that same, you know, all them 3 had the same perspective of the same event. 3 different outcomes or 2 different outcomes. One was different. It's weird, isn't it? How, and it could be time of day, something going on at home, birthday you're missing, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's really weird how it affects people and what you see. I mean, I think the difference in Musa Qaleh between Sangin, and you'd done both, so you'll know. I didn't do Sangin.
No.
You know,
Jared did Sangin DC. I never did Sangin DC. Okay. Jared did.
So is when you were, unlike Musa Qaleh, there was no off switch. Because it happened all the time, you know, 24 hours a day you could be attacked. You know, when you'd done a patrol at Sangin, and I'm very careful because I wasn't there, so I don't know. You could get a bit of downtime because you weren't going to be threat of being overrun. That was our biggest thing. There was no, you know, the compound was so overlooked, and we had Taliban up against the wall numerous occasions. Is that threat never went away? They were never going to take Sangin with a combat power, I don't think.
Yeah, like you said.
I don't know. It's different, and I never want to go into who said what. Yeah, it's horrible.
They're incomparable.
No, they are. And that's my point. Is they are totally, and you know, it's apples, oranges, pears. You just can't compare. You know, it's just different. So we couldn't leave the compound because we didn't have the combat power to get out, and actually because there was no grey space, it was straight into other compounds and stuff. It's just been suicide. Did we think about going out? Yeah, we spoke about it. We knew exactly where the Taliban were, where they were mounting most of their attacks from, and we did think, shall we go out there? But it would have been suicide, and you'd have been sucked into something that I think you'd never escape from.
No.
You know?
Yeah, we didn't have
There's no combat power, you know, especially once we'd started to take casualties.
Yeah. We're taking enough casualties inside the fucking compound
without exactly,
going out, and I'm struggling to get the casualties inside out. You know?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's, but, you know, going back to your original point is that, you know, me, Sergeant Major, arriving, Danish still there, learning as you go, brand new environment.
What are they like? What are the Danish like? Because I had a handover with a sniper team. They had a sniper section there, maybe a section and a half. I had a handover from there. Those guys seemed properly squared away, away. But I don't know about the rest of them. I don't remember that being that many of them either. 140, 150.
Yeah. But you think about, you know, you look at, they were everywhere. You know, they were like even camping outside and stuff.
I remember the vehicles. Yeah.
So they were sleeping next to the vehicles, and I just remember loads of it. And then, you know, I remember going in, and you know, ultimately professional. I think they were professionally slightly embarrassed that they had to leave politically, as all soldiers probably would be. So, but they never commented on that. It's just the sort of the feeling I got. And then it seemed to me a bit of a rush for them to get out. And then, if you remember, at the same time, they were changing out the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police at the same time. So they were going out because they'd had major issues with them, whatever the reason. They were going to be changed out. So you had all this combat power going, us arriving in a one Chinook or whatever. And then, so yeah, strange. And you remember that first, once they'd left, that next day was just like biblical, wasn't it? When, that was when the Taliban said, we'll be drinking tea in a district
I don't remember.
centre.
So talk to me about that, because I don't remember this.
Yeah.
I just, like so you were saying, I remember that, or I just remember every day was carnage.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I don't remember specific days, like, because my first day there, Jared and I were just focusing on getting a ground appreciation of the different areas, the different buildings within the compound, and understanding where we would go and when the attacks came, and also dealing with the fucking attacks that were coming in straight away.
Yeah.
From everything else, from like a man management and logistical perspective, no idea. So that stuff you were just talking about there is completely news to me.
So we arrived, took over the headquarters building, which you were in as well. We put you in with us just because of the combat power we had to sort of surround. So there was a Royal Irish platoon already there. We took a Royal Irish platoon in with us, a parachute regiment contingent. I can't remember how many that was. Not a huge amount. And then we had
they came later on.
Yeah, as battle replacement. So so there's me. I think I don't know, 10 of us maybe. Freddie, me, you, the medics.
Yeah,
Power Reg Cat badge kind of thing. Then 2 Royal Irish platoons, Royal Irish mortars, which is just mega blokes. The mortars were just outstanding. The stuff they were doing is never written down in any textbooks. You're just like, how are you putting the mortar bombs there? There's people like Danny, just like hats off to him.
Danny came on the podcast.
Really?
Danny Groves did early on. Danny Groves got on the podcast early on. So I think in my head, the Danish were there for 24 hours after we arrived. That at least a day, I think. Before they then extracted out, we changed the ANA, AMP, and we had Afghan National Security Force come in, which were just a bunch of maniacs. I don't know if you remember, but they're totally different area they'd come in from deliberately just to try and break that stranglehold of local people, local Taliban, local AMP. They'd seen some action. That their boss had been with the Americans way back in the original 2001-ish kind of time. So they'd seen a bit of action. But we'll talk about that later. They brought their own challenges, especially in the peacetime. So I think we were there for 24 hours, hectic, taking over it, making sure we were trying to scrounge as much kit. They left us loads of ammo, loads of grenades, that kind of stuff. And then they left. And then on the intercepts, we heard Taliban, they've all left. There's a small because they'd heard the helicopter come in, didn't really know helicopters were in and out all the time ish. They didn't know that we'd come in. They thought, I think, the Afghan National Police were there, Afghan security forces were there, and that was it. They were taken. And that first morning after the when the Danish had left was just biblical and strange, because literally they were walking down the main drag towards us, and it's like, wow, do they really think, and then we hit them back. So they thought all the British had left then.
Yeah, I think so.
And the Danes, they thought all the...
I think they thought, because it didn't really equate, did it? They'd seen all the Danish leave. They'd seen a few, Afghan police come back in. They'd known a helicopter had landed. Probably didn't know who was on that helicopter, because there wasn't very many of us. 88 people all up with some Afghans. And they thought, right, we're taking it. And that, I remember them, that first 24 hours was just like, wow, and and for most of them guys, that's their first experience, of combat and it was, like you say, trying to describe it now, especially some of them night attacks. It's like being in Star Wars, wasn't it? They were just tracing.
Well, that was the thing
going.
That first night, as I recall it, the first night when we just arrived, is that Jared and I got into our little room. I think we just stuck the kit down. To me, it seems like minutes. Maybe we were there a couple of hours, I don't know. Anyway, we hadn't. Yeah, I remember thinking we need to go out and like get our eyes on the different buildings and stuff. We had a map where we could see the like sort of the layout of everything, which I think was in the ops room. We had eyes on that, but I thought we need to get out. And then the attack happened.
Yeah.
Well, the first attack started. I was like, fucking hell. And Jared and I just ran out. We thought, right, where should we go? And we just got up to the nearest building. It wasn't the HQ building we got on top of. It was, it may have been the Alamo. No, it wasn't the Alamo. The outbuilding. The outpost.
Yeah, outpost.
Yeah. We got onto that one. That's sort of western side, I think it was. And you know, the first thing, you don't just start firing willy-nilly. First thing is like, right, try and work out. Because it's
where it's coming from,
tracer flying everywhere. And also because the Afghan security force were using green tracer as per Taliban. Yeah. You know, you go, right, you try and work out what's what.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't work out immediately who's friendly, which way they're firing, what's coming over the compound, what's not. Because there was a complex attack from all sides, fire was going everywhere.
It's worth describing, you know, what was it, probably 200 meters by 100, if that was the compound, maybe. Yeah. The outpost, slightly, you know, as it says, an outpost, but that's the tallest building. You're right. I remember being on the first night or so, going to the outpost because that gave you the height. We didn't really know the ground. We'd done map study and stuff, but just trying to, like you were doing, trying to find the ground, find the land. And then literally there was stuff coming everywhere, you know, like, you know, doctrinally, you're like, spot the enemy and see where they are. You're like, well, they're everywhere. You know, and like I say, there was green tracer flying, and then you think, that's Afghan, you know, who was firing, we wouldn't do. We was firing across the compound out the other side. You think, hang on a minute, what are you doing? You know, absolute carnage, you know, and you just think, and then, you know, I think we arrived, I think on the 23rd of August, and we lost John on the 27th. So we had 3 days-ish.
John Hetherington.
Yeah. We had 3 days-ish of extreme lucky. I can remember being on the outpost and an RPG missing me by, don't know, half a foot. And you're just like, you know, you're like, what the, you know, and I was like, okay, you know, just like, and then people having, you know, various experiences of that kind of thing. And it's that good luck and bad luck. None of that was my skill, you know, of not being hit by it. But it's just weird how it, you know, but that's all like grey now, looking back. I can remember them instances. But I can remember combat power was not great. So everybody had to do their bit. I think looking back, and we changed tactics. I'm not sure you recognise that, but we decided we have to protect our specialists. So the specialists were the signallers, the JTAC, the mortars, the snipers, because if we had the doctors, the medics, because everybody wanted to get some rounds down, because that's the nature of the beast. Everybody wants to be in the battle. But myself and the OC said, we need to protect these people, especially after we lost John. His ultimate soldier first, 100%. He was on the right. He was on the roof doing it because we had to. But if we'd lost more of his speciality...
Explain what John's speciality was for people.
So he was a part of the intercept team, you know, light electronic warfare team. So he would listen into various methods to hear what the Taliban were doing with an interpreter. And there was a team...
Intercepting communications.
Yeah, and there was a team of them, a small det, 3 men, I think it was. And we lost John because he was fighting on a roof, quite rightly. But that was 1/3 of our combat power of that. If we'd lost any more, and it was horrible. I remember saying to all the specialists, you know, on the OC's orders, on the briefs we had every day, you were not to fight unless we tell you, because we can't, you know, imagine we'd lost a JTAC or we'd lost a...
Jared and I weren't included in that.
No, you're not, because you needed to be where you need to be.
Right, but snipers.
But yeah. I probably shouldn't have included you as a specialist. I
was thinking, no. You never told me that message.
Well, I didn't pass it on. I heard it. I was like, fuck him. So that comes
I would have ignored you anyway.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to that bit when you got fragged on the Alamo, on the top of the Alamo. Yeah. And then, you came back with bleeding arm and everything. And technically, you probably should have been Kazovac. And I remember it was me, the doctor, and you.
I got given the option.
Yeah. And I was like, fuck off, you are going I was like, like in Zulu when you're like that, back to the wall. I was like, fuck off, you getting back. I'm not losing you. Get back to the But
I mean,
that's that. They're like, we laugh about it now. Technically, by the book, you should have been Casevac and had drip antibiotics and all that kind of stuff. And I think we only had one lot left or something. At that stage.
Yeah,
and
it was septicemia, I think.
Yeah, was the worry.
They only had one lot of antibiotics for that, and it was.
And we couldn't waste it on
me,
you.
and there was one other person who could stay there.
Yeah.
Because the injuries weren't super bad.
No. It is a laugh.
I think it was Frenchy said, Frenchy, we got one set. Do you want to stay, or you can go if you want? Or do you want to stay? And I was in my head, I was thinking, I can't go.
Yeah.
And I also was thinking, it's not the right thing. I need to stay here because I was with Jared.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But also thinking, if I go, they're really
slagging. That's right. It was like, I can remember having that chat with you because I've got a picture of you sat back in your room. You're smoking on a chair. I mean, you've seen it. You've got blood all down. That's after the event when you've gone back and the attack had finished at that stage. And I was laughing. Again, absolutely surreal now. In the real world, you would have gone back, got your treatment, and come back. We weren't playing that game. That everybody, almost to a man, had some kind of frag. Whether it hit them. I know I had in the arm. I think it was like, whatever. This is part of why you're there. It's strange.
Can I ask you about the Taliban negotiations?
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
I have got no idea, right? No. How that started, how the option of this, how the discussions about the ceasefire came about, how that progressed, how we discussed it locally. I've got vague recollections of going out with you, definitely with Adam, maybe not you. You stayed in the cab for obvious reasons.
So I was on. The OC wanted me to be on the wall on the front when we went. When you went out, the OC went out. He was like, "I need someone I can 100% trust if it all kicks off," because we didn't know what they were going to do. These were Taliban, and there were some nasty people out there.
How did that conversation even start about ceasefire? Do you got any idea?
No, this is only my perspective, obviously being in there. So by this stage, we'd fought the Taliban to a standstill. And I say that loosely because this is
it was complete stalemate, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Well, from their perspective, I don't think they realised how bad a position we were in.
Yeah, no, they didn't. But that was then balanced up with how many casualties they'd taken. I honestly don't know. I've heard 200, 300 dead from the Taliban. And that's probably not just us with the air power, so they'd lost a lot of combat power. I don't think they knew how precarious we were in there. And a concerted, we'll probably go on to this later on, but we weren't far off being overrun. If we're truthful, I think a concerted attack with a bit more tactics, they could have definitely been in a compound. I know and it's not common knowledge that we had people in a compound. Definitely once, as in trying to get in on the wrong side, 100% on the wrong side. I know that for a fact. And then in the mosque shenanigans, there were people in there which had a 5-foot wall. So there were people really close. They didn't know how close we were or how susceptible we were.
Well, the mosque had a tunnel system as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
Did it not?
Yeah.
The mosque had a tunnel system. Just for people, the significance of the mosque is that there was immediately, adjoined to the compound, the district centre wall was a mosque.
Yeah.
And the mosque was half rubberized from all the fighting that had gone on. And that was one of the 6 foot, 8 foot.
Yeah. And that's one of them positions where you couldn't really see very far, stag positions. Ultimately,
and they could get into the mosque without us even seeing.
Without being seen.
Yeah. And we'd only have an indication of them being there by literally hearing them moving about.
Yeah. No, yeah. You're looking back now, again, we would go back to it's madness, but you didn't have the combat power to do anything about it. And that side was protected by the Afghans. They did a fairly good job. But, sometimes you'd
I thought we had a couple of Royal Irish singers there as well.
Yeah, we did that left-hand side, but you think the right-hand side that faced out was all Afghans because we couldn't cover anything, and they did a good job. But half the time, a runner would come across and talk to the interpreter, and it'd be like, "Oh, there's Taliban in the mosque." You're like, "Okay," that's one. The shenanigans that happened in a couple of nights. Strange. I think they didn't know how susceptible we were to being overrun. So Taliban hard pressed, lost a lot of people, a hell of a lot of people. You had the town being absolutely smashed up. So you got the political side, you got the Taliban side, political side, and then you had us on the extreme of furthest away from Bastion, relying on air power, relying on helicopter, Kazakhstan and resupply. You put those three things together, something had to give. And I think there was willingness on the Taliban side and willingness on MOD side. We need to do something. If we'd had a proper mass casualty event and we'd lost a helicopter, can you look at how that looks politically? And I can totally understand that. And then you lose. We can't lose another helicopter. If you have a wounded person, you're not getting anyone out. Your moral component's gone.
In the wider context, we'd actually had very near this in other places.
Yeah.
If, you had the Day of Days, where Kajaki and Sangin DC. We had, I think, 3 British dead in the same day. We just completely strapped with
the Kazakhstan
with the helicopters. And we'd had like a real, from that perspective, a real dodgy, on the brink of, like you say, mass casualty anyway elsewhere.
And being at the extreme envelope of that Kazakh, I just think something had to give, and that was the negotiation was that final thing.
But it also got the point, on both sides. So one of the reasons I think that came about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because towards the end of that tour, as per normal, like SOPs, is that our battle group, they had started to wind down. We'd started to wind down. You start because of the logistics and all that stuff. You start sending, I don't mean wind down on the way and the positions you're holding, but in the background, Bastion, Lashkar, wherever else we've got resources, literally like infrastructure and resources, ammo and equipment, that starts getting sent out. Yeah. Right. And then as soon as that stuff starts leaving, and you also start losing your back, what's the word? You're supporting, what's the opposite of frontline troops? It's your
rear echelon.
Rear echelon. So you start using your rear echelon, slowly going back. That reduces your maneuverability, mainly your ability to put in, and basically gets to a point where your ability to put in a battle group operation is lost.
So I think
that place took a battle group operation
to get in and out. And that's the background to that. I've always in my head argued that 6-month tours are not actually that good. You look at the American do a year tour because you get more ability in the middle. So in a 6-month tour, it takes you a month to sort yourself out, get on the ground, learn the ground, and you've got a month at the end where you're thinking about going home. So actually you only have 4 months in the middle where you can have a real effect. Times that by 6-month tours, you're not having a huge effect. Where the Americans were there for a year, you're getting a 10-month effect. You're doubling your money. So that, you're right. I think it was just consequences led to we need to do something, and that something was, as in that part of the world, was negotiation. And I think it was throwing money at it, and I think that's what they did. No evidence, but I would imagine, and looking how things operate, I've heard millions of dollars thrown around. I don't know, no proof.
Recently, I'd never heard it before, but I heard recently as late last year, and the first time I've heard it, I was listening to Liz McConaughey give a speech at the Special Forces Club in London. Liz McConaughey, Chinook crew chick, and obviously she was a Chinook Lodi. Anyway, at that I met Bruce Compton, Bruce Compton, and he said to me on the subject of Chinooks, he said that he had heard a story from another Chinook, a Chinook pilot maybe, that $1 million had been flown in by Chinook as a payoff for that, and I'd never heard it before. No. I knew there was cash. I knew we'd handed over cash in a pickup. I knew that. And I think it was a few payments, right? Yeah. It was hidden. I think I got that from you, actually, maybe. I don't know. And it had been hidden in with some supplies, which they were letting us get in on a.
That definitely happened. The OC received cash just to grease the wheels locally. Right. Because it's the way of the world. And you can raise your eyebrows and tut at it, but it assists in just greasing the wheels. That's how it is. And so it doesn't surprise me. And I've heard that same rumours, no evidence of stuff, but that part of the world, as in all parts of the world, money talks. And if it's ultimately saved our lives, then fair play. You know, I'm no sort of
I'm
no
worth
adverse feelings
I'm worth
to
$1
it.
million bucks.
Yeah,
mate.
well, I
I'm
thought
worth
it
$1
easy to give it to me, and I would have fought my way out. Like, no problem. But yeah, again, strange, isn't it? But if that's what it took, and and the locals that were either aligned to the Taliban or aligned to the district centre, that was their hometown. You know, that Musa Qaleh was in a bad place, wasn't it? The Taliban and us had literally destroyed the whole town, and you know, the bombs we were dropping and all that stuff. It's in a bad way. I just think they wanted their way of life, you know. And it's worth noting that there was no civilians there, was there?
Oh, there was. There was the
The
one
blind
guy,
beggar.
the blind guy.
I've written that as a note. Yeah,
Do you ever see him?
Yeah. Don't you remember what
The guy with the
we
walking
did?
stick.
Yeah.
Hang on. Right, you tell the story.
Okay, I'll tell you.
I don't know what story it's going to be.
That's your memory getting old. So there was rumours, and I mean, you might have told me this, that it goes, there's this blind beggar that's cutting around town, and I'm like, it's not. You know what I mean? And I was like, I think I said to you and Jared, right, show me. So we went on to the outpost or whatever, and you were like, look, there he is there. And he was like, it looked like, you know, he had a stick and everything. And I do remember I was saying to it, I was like, right, because you had a 338. I said, right, put a 338 within a foot of his head. We'll soon see if he's blind. And you went, phew.
Fuck, I don't remember.
Do you remember that? Yeah, I was laughing. And the bloke, like, he's either the best spy ever, or you know, just like didn't bat an eyelid. You know, the 338 sniper round just go whiz past his head. Just carried on. He knew his way round. And then I go, right, do it again. And he did it again. And then we're like, right. And then remember, it sent a snatch squad out to get him. Do you remember that?
Oh, I vaguely remember that, but he wasn't a beggar.
No,
he had a shop.
Beggar. Yeah,
he had a shop in the town.
And
he would come into the shop. This is how I remember.
Yeah.
He would come into the shop. He literally feeling his way down the wall on the street. Coming into the machines.
But this day, his route had changed because it was like someone had thrown a grenade and rubberized it. He was like tripping over. He'd remembered this route. You know, it's like terrible. But he was the only one
stubborn old man
in the town.
Shop,
So we sent a snatch party out to get him.
But I think he was getting supplies, food or something from the shop.
I don't know. And I think the locals, when they were there, looked after him. So he was a bit pressurized. And I think he had a cat or a dog.
This is Chinese whispers now, Scriv.
No, this is
a cat or a dog. Come on.
Not on him, but like wherever he lived, right? So we snatched him back because we were unsure whether he was a Taliban spy or whatever. He'd come in. I've never smelt a human being that bad. You know, he didn't know his way to the shower, put it that way. And it was like, so we grabbed him and said, look, it's dangerous around here. Do you want to stay in the compound? Because it worked out he's blind, you know, absolutely blind. Do you want to stay in the compound? We'll feed you, we'll look after you. He was like, no, I've got a cat or a dog at home. And he left and we let him go. Mad. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, absolutely surreal. And he refused to help. He goes, no, I want to live in the town. And we were like, well, be careful because we're having a bit of a battle here if you hadn't noticed. And he went, no, I have heard one or two things. I was like, and he went off and he stayed. He was around till the end. You know, I don't think he got killed. But yeah, that is just madness, isn't it? So I can't remember
So what was, the talk, go back to the talks then. So at that point I remember the one time that Adam went out at the front to discuss with the local elders stroke fucking Taliban.
Yeah, 100%.
What was that part of the discussion? Because there was also discussions going on at a higher level, like we're talking like strategic,
absolutely.
a national level
so,
as well.
You know,
right?
not quite rightly, we're not. Well, I didn't know much about that, but we knew they were taking talks at every single level, and we were dealing with the local village elders that came. And that first meeting was with the village elders. There were 100% Taliban there. You could tell, you know, the old grey beards, and then slightly younger people. Whatever, but we'd had a contingency, you know. You went out, I was on the wall with GPMGs and stuff, and we had a plan if it did go wrong. You know, our worst scenario was that they would try and snatch the OC. Or, you know, you just don't know, do you? You know, we'd had some hard fighting and pretty brutal, horrible stuff. Didn't really trust anyone. That was the climate behind it. Looking back now, it seems quite easy when you do that. But so you went out, and that initial discussion was literally brokering in it. We needed supplies as well. So it was, I think the first discussions, can we get supplies in? And then they brought supplies in with a load of cash, with some fresh fruit and that kind of stuff. Do you remember? Yeah, yeah. You know, that newspapers, which went down really well. You know, I think that was one of the later resupplies when it was like 3 para heroes back in England on the papers. You remember?
Oh, everyone was back on leave in the
No,
UK,
we
weren't
were
they?
still sat in
We were
Musa
still in
Qaleh. I was
Musa
like,
Qaleh, yeah.
getting thanks for that, you know, and just like horrendous. So that initial was just resupply in and out kind of thing, and then it went to
it was a
an
Hilux.
extraction.
They were letting a Hilux in, weren't they? It was
Yeah,
a pickup truck.
their Hilux. That you know,
Yeah, it
so
was
they were
their
going out,
Hilux. They were getting kit.
meeting someone in the desert, and then you know the supplies, and then bringing it in, which again is madness. But it was nice to have them supplies. You know, we hadn't had much resupply, if any, nothing, especially after the helicopter had nearly been shot down. And then it, you know, if you can remember, it was like, yeah, you're going to get extracted. And I can remember like 3 or 4 dates being pinged out. And then the last one was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. You're not going to get extracted for 4 weeks. And that was just the kick in the balls. You're just like, what?
I remember that.
Remember that. And the morale was just like, wow.
Into the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was. And that's no fault of no fault of anyone's. The Marines were coming in. 3 power was going home. 3 power battle group were going home. And you had that month that we spoke about, their ability to project themselves, because they had to do all the training, hand over the kit, all that kind of stuff. It fell within that month, and we had to really weather that month so they could then come out, and then that's what ultimately happened. But how them discussions about the jingly trucks, and no idea how that happened. By that stage, I would have crawled out of there. I didn't care. It never overly bothered me that we left. Perceptually, it didn't look very good, but I was ready to leave at that stage.
Yeah, I
would have walked out of there.
Yeah, I've done a couple of I've done a couple of like American podcast interviews recently. I've been invited on and always get asked, yeah, what was that like?
Yeah,
like what did you think? What did you feel? And I'm like, I didn't give a fuck.
I didn't.
Like I was concerned for security.
Yeah,
which I was, because I'm getting in a wagon with these Afghans. Who are these guys?
Jared's
in the back of the wagon. Going, how are we safe here?
Yeah,
but. Further than thinking about immediately safety and security, the actual like the wider context of it and how it was all happening, I didn't give a shit.
No,
like oh my god, because I remember, you know, when you talk about their, like when they said to us about another 3 or 4 weeks and me going out, and you said there was dates getting abandoned around, we got within 2 or 3 days of the day. Yeah. I think it was 2 days away. We're going to be leaving.
You know, we'd started doing all that stuff. And then
it was, you're not leaving.
Yeah.
Another month probably. Yeah. And it was hideous.
So, you know, and we spoke about challenges of being a senior NCO, being a sergeant major. War fighting sort of takes care of itself. You're in the here and now. That fragile piece was horrendous, trying to keep people motivated. We still had sentries on. The Afghans were just a nightmare.
In what way? You mentioned it earlier. What was up with the Afghan security force then? You mentioned earlier.
They were mental. When we were fighting,
I remember they were getting high all the time on whatever they were smoking.
So
heroin, I suppose.
Yeah. So when we were fighting, fine, everyone had a common purpose. When that fragile peace came in,
the ceasefire.
Yeah. They became just a bunch of naughty boys. So they, like you say, they were getting high.
Didn't they rob? They robbed some night vision, didn't they? From us. They robbed some
MVGs. So you know, I think it's idle hands. They were idle hands. You know, it was just horrendous. And I was over there every single day as a sergeant major, just telling them to screw the nut. And ultimately, I said, and the OC said, we will kick you out if you continue this business, because there was a bit of thieving, just shenanigans. You know, they're just young lads who are high on heroin at stages. You would have seen that. Very good fighters, and it's not knocking them in that way, but there was no fighting to be done at that stage.
Would it have been, here's heroin, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. You know, and they were a nightmare. Nicking stuff, arguing with the other, because they were from a different region, a different tribe, you know, a different race, really. It was a nightmare. And that consumed my time. You literally go over just trying to placate it all. Yeah, I'm very careful what I say next. So I don't remember if you remember when we had 2 prison officers. One of them was killed. You remember we had the prison. It was a prison. The Alamo was a prison. There were 2 Afghans there. They were prison.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, they were prison officers.
Yeah, it was a prison.
Right, and you remember there is video footage, and it's not out there, of either a mortar, or I think it was a grenade, coming over the wall and killing one of them. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember.
So they lived in like the prison block, which was the Alamo. Grenade comes over the wall for a reason. The mortars had a video on that. I think they were just literally testing out their camera that worked, and it captured that bloke's death. Unfortunately, his body parts and the blood went all round their room, and the other bloke was badly fragged, and I think he got Kazavaked out on the top of my head as part of one of our sort of things. But their room was just covered in claret, all sorts of stuff, unimaginable. Couldn't leave it like that. So we just ended up burning that whole room because it was just horrible. You know, it was me and grabbed a couple of blokes, burnt it. An interpreter came up to me and said, "Where's the Quran from that room?" And I was like, "No idea. I didn't know that every room had a Quran in. Didn't realise." And he goes, "What have you done with the stuff?" I said, "It's all covered in blood." And you can imagine what I'm going to say next. We ended up burning that through. No, we didn't know. It wasn't a Quran that you could take. It was just covered in blood, and it was part of the rubbish in that room. So we burnt it because you had to. It was just biologically infected. And they were like the interpreter just went absolutely white and said, "If this gets out to especially the Afghan force we were talking about, high on drugs, they will murder one of us," and you're just like, wow, you just don't realize. But, we didn't know. Okay. It wasn't done with any malicious thing, but that's what you're dealing with. They're highly volatile. Do you remember them chasing the interpreter around because they thought had been disrespected?
No.
So, the interpreter, and you may not have seen it, but you want the interpreter to interpret, not to ad lib. And one of our interpreters was ad-libbing. So he was like...
Was that the Brummie?
Yeah, he was like...
We had, some context in this. One of the interpreters, so this is an Afghan interpreter. Normally these guys, they're locals. They are Afghans who can speak English and Pashtun. And usually, so we'll go into an operation. This is for any country we need an interpreter. You normally get a local. And quite often, places we go to have had Western forces there before. And we'll normally get, who Afghan or Iraq is concerned, we'll have someone who's normally worked with the Americans before. Cool, trustworthy. Well, in Musa Qaleh, the guy we had there was actually a guy who had been brought up in Birmingham.
Yeah.
So he'd come from Birmingham across, didn't he, to Afghan.
There's a real skill in being an interpreter. You need, looking back now. So
not only was he not used to a siege,
the way of life.
He also wasn't used to Afghan.
And how things are done, because that's what you need to do things properly. It's culturally. So, as an interpreter, and looking back now, it is one of the faults we should have done. Just translate what I'm saying. Yeah. Don't add your own part. But I think he was then adding his own part, whether it's to big him up, what he thought was right. No maliciousness in it. And then the Afghans took absolute umbrage to what he said, thinking, I think they realised that he was adding his own thing, and literally were chasing him around the compound. I had to draw my pistol and stop it. Just say, well, he is on our side and you're on our side. Stop. But that flash to bang culturally, we don't have it in this country.
It's cultural clash is all it is. It's cultural misunderstanding.
But you would have noticed it. Especially in
it's a cultural clash is all it is. It's major. When I say all it is, it's as simple as that. Wildly different cultures.
And, if we had an argument now, we would raise our voice and then it will get heated and then ultimately could come to fisticuffs.
You see the combat indicators coming.
Yeah, but over there, it's like, whoop, isn't it? It's like, it's literally, we're having an argument, I'm going to kill you. And I think that's part of the pressure and part of the stress of being in that Musa Qaleh environment. But they were like, gonna kill him, chasing him round with a brick to smash his head. And you're just like, wow, then that's, when I say that's the difficulties we had in that piece, just trying to stop him from imploding.
Yeah, it was a weird time, that. It was a weird time. Not comfortable.
Yeah, strange. I think that, what's come apparent with what we're chatting now is just that perspective. We're in the same place doing the same thing, but those perspective of events are totally different, aren't they? What you've seen, look at the beggar. You could, I can remember that. And then you were there, sat next to me. Do you remember that? I think we were on the outpost again. And we saw a torch right out. Do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the talk,
it's straight, and then, so the context is there's no civilians there. So these are bad people. And I can remember going, go on, and just like, and the torch went, and it was like, yeah, these are bad, bad people. They're just like, and it sounds absolutely madness now, positively ID people. And there was no one apart from the beggar. There was no civvies there. We knew everyone we saw was 100% the enemy. And you can remember our main threats was obviously in that 10 days, ground attack, absolute ground attack, close combat, people up and against the compound, grenades, small arms, and then they took a hell of a beating, and then it went to mortars, recalless rifles, RPGs. That's how because they couldn't take that amount of casualties, and that was the most frightening thing. You remember them Chinese rockets?
Yeah,
just like a freight train coming through, isn't it? You're looking back now, I can still remember that. My recollection of the absolute detail is cloudy, just because what it is. But I can remember a few things. I can remember vividly, and I'm careful what I say, of John Hetherington getting hit by 7.62. That thud.
Were you on the roof with him? Yeah,
I was down the bottom of the stairs.
Oh, okay.
So that goes back to, and that incident is protecting. We had that conversation, protecting our assets. So after that, myself and the OC said we can never be in the same place at the same time. So ultimately, he needed his rest. I needed my rest. So we, someone needs to go to the outpost. He would go. I would go.
The thing is about that, right? There'll be people listening to this and go, "Well, that's fucking basics. You don't put the OC in the sergeant major in the same place. You don't put the platoon commander and the platoon sergeant in the same place. It's like you separate them out." Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't think about these things in a compound because normally when you think about a patrol base, a forward operating base, anything like that, a platoon house, you think of that as that is your safe environment. That is your downtime. You have your sentries up. Yeah. You're protected.
You've got space,
and you're good. You normally have you normally have some sort of warning when there's an attack coming. Where you can get into hard cover or whatever. The threat when you're inside a compound is relatively low. Wasn't the case in Musa Qaleh.
No, it never
wasn't. You had to think about things entirely differently.
And that goes back to that stress of it could happen and it did. Some of what was the most? I don't know, 15, 20 contacts in a day. I don't know.
I don't know. I think the peak was about 10.
I don't know. Yeah, but just any time. It wasn't like it just madness, wasn't it? And so you never had any downtime. And if you were careful, you think about the amount of sleep we were operating on in that times.
I became an insomniac. I lost the ability to sleep.
Because you couldn't be asleep when there was an attack going because we didn't have enough combat power. In your roles as a sergeant major, the sergeant major's asleep. When you're losing people, that just doesn't happen, doesn't it? You need to be around. The OC needs to be around. Needs to make them decisions. So some days you were operating on 2 hours sleep, but that's not sleep, is it? You like one eye open, kind of stuff. And that constant pressure, the stress was just madness. How that
constantly on a hair trigger.
Yeah. So that me and the OC, you're right. We were together. We stayed in the same building, but we made that conscious decision that one would have to do one thing, one would have to do the other. So we sort of took it in turns to you run the ops room, control the QRF, that kind of stuff. One would be forward, and we just rotated it through because the OC couldn't be 24 hours on.
Did you know Adam before that?
Yes and no. He was OC support company, so I knew him through association, but not, never served, together as that. So, but right man, right time. I think. I just wonder what kind of how that shaped him. Personally, and as a commander. Yeah. Because I don't know what he was like before. Yeah. No, I didn't, and I can't say. But
you can talk about your pressure, which is one thing. I think his probably a whole other level.
Yeah.
A whole other level.
Ultimately, every bomb dropped was his initials on it. That's how it, the JTAC had to get the OC's permission to drop. Some of that stuff that we dropped, danger close, and then there's danger close. Do you remember that one?
The A10?
No, that's the A10 is brilliant footage, but we bought in that, I'm going to say £500, it may not be wrong. That came within 100 metres. Do you remember we had to, you said, everybody take cover, everybody open their mouths. Do you remember that one?
shit!
Do you remember?
I forgot about this.
You know, that
I forgot about this.
Again, talking about it now is ultimately insane.
I forgot.
But the JTAC was like, so we knew that the enemy were massing at the back where the toilets were. They tried to get into the toilets. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I remember.
They tried to get through the toilets because they were just a hole going out, which is a whole different story, one which I probably would never go into. But they would try to get through that, and we knew they were the other side. And then the only way we couldn't. You can't project fire on it because the outpost was too far away. The walls were too high. We just couldn't get to them without going out.
There's no way to direct fire.
No, and if we'd got out, we would have been probably, hit badly, taken casualties, all that stuff we didn't want to do. The only thing was to drop a bomb. And I'm going to say 500-pounder, may be wrong. But the JTAC I was stood next to the OC and he said, by the book, you cannot bring it in this close. And the OC was, this is the OC's pressure. If I don't do something, they are going to mass and they're going to come over that wall. And then we're in a whole world of hurt. And then it goes back to before. We'll probably be overrun. And this is the detail that's never come out. That's how close you were to being overrun. And, there was probably 50 Taliban over there. With the intercepts, you can work out. And we need to drop the bomb or we're going to get overrun. And that, and I can remember saying, right. And the JTAC was like, it's going to be so close. You need to open your mouth, close your ears, stop fighting, drop down, and went across the radio and we called it in, just like it's coming. And then and if you remember, it cracked the wall, the dust everywhere, blew people off their feet. Ultimately, it stopped that attack.
That's another one of those things, right? We were talking off air before this, and I was saying you're going to say things, and I'm going to remember them. And I'm going to be amazed that I forgot that I even like. How can something that significant be forgotten? And it's because. It's not just because of that tour. It's the melee of everything we were involved with then and everything since. That sweet spot of operations that fortunately and unfortunately many people in the British Forces were part of over that, from 2001 to the 2015-ish, something like that. Proper kinetic. And you end up forgetting mental stuff.
Yeah, and the only reason I remember that is because you remember one of the signalers, Simo, right? He had a
great guy.
Yeah,
great guy.
He had a different camera, right?
And
we knew this was coming in, right? And it sounds like perverse now. I was like, get your ass on that roof, put your camera facing that way on timer, and then run down. He's crawled up, put it up there because this will be epic footage. It is like this is the madness of the world you're about. If he'd have been shot, I'd have been gutted and I'd have denied everything. But no, so he put it up there, and then for some reason it didn't capture the footage, and that's how I remember because I slagged him off. I was like, that would have been the ultimate. That 500-pounder was coming in 70 meters away or something, whatever it was. It was close, mega close, and that's how I remember it. And I can remember being lifted off the floor and feeling the overpressure. Ears ringing, dust everywhere, knock stuff off. It's just like madness. But that was replicated. That A10 you mentioned is just like epic footage. That's coming in 30 meters away.
Yeah.
Breaking up an attack that's about to happen is happening. It's just, by tactics and doctrine, no way should you be doing that. These are exceptional times. And, a lot of people slag the Americans off. Ultimately, their air power that they, will never be slagged by me. They saved our bacon on numerous occasions there. Not mainly Americans, but, a lot of, but the Americans with the A10s were just outstanding, weren't they?
Yeah.
I love the A10.
It would have been a very different story if we'd had more air power, or if we'd had less.
No, the two extremes. No air power, overrun. More air power, probably. In easier time. Put it that way. But fucking strange. So the hard bit for me was that trying to give that rainbow effect to the guys, to say there is gold at the end of the rainbow, because at times it got dark, didn't it? You're just like, there's no hope, especially when those dates came in and kept getting moved back. It's just trying to say, guys, hang with it, and that's that part of that Sergeant Major OC. You gutted yourself. You can't show that. And that's something as a Sergeant Major never gets taught. So that the perception of the Sergeant Major, and I've got a couple of stories about that. The ethos and the perception of a sergeant major is he has to be, I think, and what I try to do is that Superman, that constant, not in skills and stuff, which are given, but never show any weakness, never show any negativity. That's what I try to do as a sergeant major, because that if you didn't do that, it would, I think, would have filtered down through the company. You need to be that ultimate guy that's just a backbone, never show any fear, and that's the way I tried to kind of play it. And there was a couple of instances. We're cutting around at night and went to see the mortars, and they were taking some incoming coming over the thing.
Because their pit wasn't that far from the exterior wall, was it?
No, just there.
Their mortar.
Probably 3 meters.
Yeah.
So they were getting grenades over the top, mortars over the, as in we all were getting mortars, but they were ultimately.
I think there's a small building between. I think there's a really small building
really
between
small.
them and the wall, didn't they?
Yeah, but ultimately that wall was the old combat, and then you had compounds that were fairly close where people could get to and lob stuff over. So every now and again they'd get one, and then they'd quite rightly have to scatter and go back into their room. Do you remember their room? There was they were all in that tiny little room, and they'd just received a grenade over the wall, fairly close to them. Their Pinsgauer was all fragged. If you remember, do you remember? It was just shrapnel. I'd come round, and for some reason I never had my body armor on. I don't know why. I didn't have a helmet on. I don't think it was just the way it was in the compound. I didn't always put it on to cut around and stuff. You just didn't have time sometimes. I had my weapon with me before I get slagged. Sometimes.
Your weapon.
Yeah. But then as I went around the compound, and they were in the room, and I remember because the guys were in there, cracking bunch of lads. And as I walked around the corner, this grenade mortar went off behind me.
Grenade mortar? You mean explosion? You don't know what
Something.
it was?
I don't know what it was. Yeah. It wasn't some kind of specialist weapon. It was some kind of thing. And then it like. They saw me in the doorway silhouetted, and then they saw this massive explosion, that flames behind me, blew my shirt off over the top.
Jesus.
And they were like, fucking hell. But then that in my head, I'm like, stay cool, Rodney. Or whatever, stay cool. Inside, you're like, my fucking God, I nearly died there. 10 seconds later, that would have got me. But I was like, I've got to play it cool. And they were like, fucking hell, are you not bothered? I was like, no. Went back to my room, like, oh my God.
It's true, though. It's true. It's absolutely right. You're absolutely right what you're saying just now. It's that. So if you were the senior NCO, right? The senior NCO.
Yeah.
If you were the senior non-fucking commissioned officer right there, then you were the person. You were the role model. You were the role model that everyone look up to. And in times of intense hardship, whether that's on an exercise, whether it's on some crazy, horrendous physical activity you're doing, or whether it's in a battle, which is craziness, or whether it's in a siege in the middle of Afghanistan, right? Your actions, they have a massive, this, I'm preaching to convert.
But I
they
think
have a massive impact on people.
Yeah.
If you are someone that gets ratty, if you are someone that gets pissed off, if you are someone that is demonstrating that you've got really low morale, it rubs off on everyone else.
100%.
If you are someone that's whinging all the time about something, everyone else starts whinging. If you are someone that is being there and being at the very least neutral or being positive and always demonstrating like it's okay, we're going to get through it, you're demonstrating exactly what the perfect leader should espouse themselves to be: confidence, high quality, experience, knowledge, integrity. It rubs off on everyone 100%. And it gets people through.
And and I'm very careful it doesn't come across egotistic.
Too late.
That kind of thing. Big headed. Ultimately not. You are as scared as the next man, but it's part of your job. It's your game face, and it is ultimately playing a game. There was times in Afghan, and you probably would have been the same, is as a sergeant major, absolutely show no weakness. You cannot show any weakness. You've got to be that, that Superman kind of thing. And I say that, my hair stands on end because I'm not a Superman. But you've got to show that, because you can't show any weakness to them young lads. They're looking up to you to do the right thing and to be there for them at the end of the day. These guys are being killed and wounded. They need to know someone's going to get to them. And that ultimately is the sergeant major and the medics, which they did all the time. Game face. But there was times, we used to walk out the back of a building in the night by myself, and I would just take a minute and go, whew. No one else needed to see that. And I always looked up at the stars, and there's certain constellation, which I won't say, that I always look for, just gives you that bit of peace. And I did, and I took 30 seconds, a minute, came back in, probably slagged you off, back to normal. But you have to take, you had to do it just to reset, because there was some horrendous stuff happen there, isn't there? Stuff
it was
you
a
can
12-day period. It was a 12-day
Yeah.
period. I think it was from the day after we got there.
Yeah. It
It was 55 casualties in 12 days.
Yeah.
And that was a mix of British and Afghans, and that was dead and injured. 55
Yeah.
in 12
Yeah.
days,
It's just-
which is just mental.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, it sounds like it is a lot. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot. And when you factor into that because of how few of us there were and how constrained in the space they were, there's no hiding anyone from that.
No.
Everyone sees it.
Yeah.
Everyone sees it. Every day there are multiple casualties every single day.
Yeah.
And that fucking grinds you down.
Yeah.
Really, really, really grinds you down. Because with those odds, you think about the probabilities there. It's a question of not if, it's when.
Yeah.
It's literally if and when. You said earlier, most people there took some kind of injury. Most people.
Again, it just sounds weird saying it now. It became the norm.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You slag people off that weren't fragged. You'd like, just, I remember coming in and not even realising I'd been fragged. Like you, just blood pouring down my arm, and, Steve's going, what's that? And I don't know. And, and you beep through when
Oh, I knew when I got mine. It was fucking killing me.
Yeah. Shaving. yeah. And, just like, because you had adrenaline and all that kind of stuff. It's weird. And, everyone was fragged just because it was just part of the thing. The one that annoyed me most when one of them blew my windows out of my room. Do you remember? The window fell off, and I was like, everything got dusty. I was like, oh God.
The thing is that it's interesting. It's always something that stuck with me. One of the things that I've learned in my time serving, these things we were fortunate and unfortunate enough to be part of, and I think many other people resonate with this, or maybe have learned this too, is that your ability to take extreme discomfort or pain or real bad circumstances is much greater if you don't have any other option.
Yeah.
If you know you've got another option, you have to take this. You have to be here.
Yeah.
You have to get on with
there's
it
no
every
other
day.
choice.
You've
Yeah.
got zero choice. The ability to just get on with it, and your mind just go, fuck it.
Yeah.
And your body, physically and mentally, can just be as fatigued as like nothing else you've ever experienced, and yet you are back at it. The next attack comes in, you're back at it.
But
Whatever task it needs to be done.
I think that leads nicely on to one of the things I was going to mention is that, we talk about Siege and Musa Qaleh. We had them honest discussions, and we remember rehearsing, falling back into the Alamo, as it was called.
The central main.
Yeah, the old fort that was in the middle of the DC. That was.
It was just to explain to people. That was in the district compound is a bunch of buildings, and relatively centre to that was the biggest building. So it was the biggest in sort of volume and
oldest
height
as well.
Biggest in volume, and it was the prison.
It looked like the Alamo, didn't it? It was
it looked like the
made
Alamo.
of mud, pretty rough.
Yeah,
but thick walls, high walls, only one or two ways in.
Yeah,
I can remember.
So you could fall back everyone into that. And
again, I'm not sure if you were sure. We were by the end. We were in them sort of 12 days, immensely short of ammunition. Remember relinking to make Minimi rounds, which had to be linked 5.56, stripping the Danish stuff down, all that kind of stuff. We, as a Sergeant Major in charge of ammunition, putting reserves in the Alamo, because we had the honest discussion. If they breached the walls, which, we came hideously close to being breached, and it absolutely gives me the shivers now, because it was such a 360 battle. If people had got in and were amongst us, can you imagine the carnage? Because you didn't know who was who.
It would have been carnage just with British in there, but with Afghan security forces inside as well, and knowing how what their skills are like compared to ours.
Yeah. And tactics, they didn't have any the same as ours. We weren't joint operating. We were in the same place.
It'd be blue on blue everywhere. Blue on blue, blue on blue.
It would have been absolute, well, it's not even worth thinking about. But we had that discussion, and we gave orders that if we were breached, we had a code word, and I can't remember what that was, to fall back. It might have been Alamo, fall back to the Alamo, and you'd fight from the Alamo. And then on the back of that, and it gives me like goose pimples to think about it. We had that discussion. I don't know if you were there, but Freddie was there. Maybe the OC was there, about not being taken alive. Again, sat in the middle of London, absolutely surreal. But I remember saying to Freddie, "I am not being taken alive." And this is the extreme circumstances we're in. I was like, "I'm not having my family watch me be beheaded, because that's probably what they would have done." And then Freddie mentions it. He had a bullet with his name on it. Not literally, but ultimately. To sit here now and talk about that, it just seems so unreal. But that's the time and space you're in. I don't know if you ever had that, had that discussion. You're probably too busy, but
maybe
then quiet
if
times.
I did, I don't remember it.
Yeah, probably something we had over a brew, and those that smoked over a fag, to say it's not happening. Whether I hate saying it, because you can never judge what you would do at the time. But my overriding thought was, I'm not having my family watch me be beheaded. Whatever, I'll fight to the death, I'll kill myself. I'm not having that. That's not my legacy of who I want to be sort of left in. That it sounds really perverse way of saying it, but it's so matter of fact as that when we had that discussion. It's strange to say it now, but that's that was the conversation we had.
Let's take a pause. Let me think about this. I have fortunately never been in a position where one of my team, I've lost one of my team. Not when they've been with me anyway. Weirdly, actually, I wonder if you've had the same experience. Weirdly, I remember I've had some guys who died later on, like Matt Chanro, for example, sticks in my mind. I know when Matt Chanro died, although I was out in the army then. He was in Hereford then. And when he died, I felt almost a little bit of guilt there, which for no reason, or as if I'd been commanding him. Yeah. And I think it was like legacy, sort of leadership, command element, care for your blokes thing. Really strange. But I've been fortunate enough never to lose someone in my unit. What is it like from your perspective as a sergeant major, where obviously a core component of one of the roles of sergeant major is maintenance and morale, but all the other pieces, the blokes are yours.
No, I think I mentioned it earlier on. Luckily, and I say that 100% selfishly, I didn't know a lot of the Royal Irish guys intimately. It was my company for that time. Really, I was company sergeant major as soon as I stepped off that helicopter, which is like straight into it. So by default, it was easier when we had the Royal Irish deaths, because they were mine as I was a sergeant major, easy company. But unlike you, that I'd known for sort of 10, 12 years, I emotionally wasn't as attached. So I could, and it's very much me. I have, one of my many faults is that lack of empathy. It's just, I've always had it. I really struggle to be empathetic to people, and it's a good thing, and it's a horrible thing. So I can just box things up and put them away, and they don't come out ever again. I think it's quite nice. So I'm quite cold-hearted unless you're in my inner circle. So it was slightly easier to sergeant major. That said, losing anyone is just horrible, and what's been horrible is looking at the effect it had on their friends. So I won't mention who it was. Because it's out there. Is when Dravia was hit by the mortars, which you were first on the scene, and then
Dravia and Muirhead.
Yeah, and I was fairly close behind you. The injuries that he had were horrific. And he was alive for a bit, and that. But when he died, he was the doctor had pronounced him dead. We had to put him in a body bag, which we had run out of 6 body bags, I think within about 3 days, through the Afghans, through our guys. They were gone, prison wardens, all that kind of stuff. They were gone. We had to put him in his own sleeping bag. Again, absolutely surreal.
Oh my God.
That platoon sergeant, quite rightly, was invested. His bloke couldn't do it, didn't want to do it. I 100% understand it's no fault of his own, and said, I can't do this. And he was a big lad, Dravia, and I ended up putting him in his own sleeping bag with his horrific injuries. Where they were, looking straight at me. And just, you can't unsee them things. And you think, I shouldn't be putting someone in his own sleeping bag to take him back. So we put him in a medical bag, yellow medical bag, put him in his own sleeping bag, and then send him on his journey home, which is just, horrific. And as a sergeant major, it's what you get paid to do. But you can't unsee them things. And you can never, I can still see his face now and all the injuries he had and all that kind of stuff. But more that stays with me is that effect it had on his platoon sergeant, who probably felt the guilt that through no fault of his own that he couldn't save him. No one could have saved him. It was pure luck, bad luck, good luck, separated by millimeters that we spoke about. But that hits me more than his injuries and me having to put him in his sleeping bag. It was the effect it had on his platoon sergeant. And that was amplified. I had a Royal Irish guy who, I can't remember who was killed. It may have been Muirhead, that we couldn't get out straight away. He said, can I spend some time with him in his body bag? Little things.
It wouldn't be Muirhead, because Muirhead was still alive when
so it may be, I can't remember who it was. And
Muirhead was still
it
alive,
may have been Dravia. Can I spend some time with him? Fine. It's little things. It didn't, technically, get back on the Stanger position, but actually investing in that guy, giving him as much time as he want to do, he might have been religious. I am not religious. But I recognise that when you push people to the extremes, absolutely extremes, they reach out to someone. Now, whether that is God, whether that is someone else, when you're under that amount of pressure, in your own mind, you might have seen that. You speak to someone, it's who you reckon that someone is. And if it gave him a little bit of peace, and hopefully peace now to be with, with his best mucker for that last half an hour, it doesn't matter in the big scheme of things. It's them little things. So that's what they can never teach you as a sergeant major, is how do you make them things up? Because I could have just gone, being lack of empathy and I struggle with, no, get back to the wall. That's where we need you. But actually investing in that guy for half an hour, I don't know, he may have come back stronger than that, but it's difficult decisions and difficult times to, looking back now, I just think no one ever teaches that kind of stuff. You just got to wing it. Yeah,
they're the only times I've seen people emotionally overcome is when they lose their best muckers.
Yeah, it's horrible. And especially, and I think soldiers are the worst at it because they try and apply some kind of guilt to it. Like you said, there's nothing you could have done when Map 10 wrote. You weren't even there. You weren't in the same country, but you feel that kind of guilt. And, with Tom Beckett and a couple of other people.
I think guilt's actually the wrong word.
Yeah,
I think it's a sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a sense of responsibility. As if you're still his commander.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if I hadn't let him, go on selection.
No, it's not even to that level. It's not even to that level. No. It's like a lingering.
Yeah.
At one point, this guy was my guy.
Yeah.
And now he's gone. It's that.
Yeah.
Lingering sense of responsibility. I'm not as...
No.
I know, or you and I both know guys, I think, and some of them aren't you anymore, who did that thing where they lost mates and they attributed part of that to themselves, blame for it, in some wildly indirect way.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think, personally, that's where this PTSD thing... I recognise there is PTSD. I think it's been diluted by cowards that have gone, I've been caught drink driving, it must be PTSD. No, you were a dick. That's where I struggle to... Ultimately, there is people that have ultimately suffered 100%. I recognise it as a syndrome. Have I suffered? No. Has it affected me? Yes. And it's played out... and I've only recognised it sort of recently in that OCD... It plays out with me. I like things to be planned. I like things to be organised. I used to snap over stupid things like the dishwasher's not loaded properly. And I think that's how it played out in my head. And then don't know why. And whether is that PTSD, is that me just being a knob? I don't know. But now I've recognised, okay, I see that in myself and it doesn't matter anymore. Some things are more important. So I've sort of balanced the force in my head. But for Musa Qaleh was almost 20 years ago, next year, a long time ago.
Doesn't feel like it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel like it in the fact I can't remember a lot of the stuff, going back through this has been good to remember it, but it also seems like yesterday.
It seems like yesterday.
Yeah. Memory-wise, it's cloudy, but actually some of the stuff is absolute clarity. Some of them, the thud of John Hetherington will stay with me forever. Just that is weird how that some smells will stay with me forever, of whether it's cordite, that every now and again you get a whiff of something, you think, wow, and you are straight back there. It's just, I just like, how does that, how does that work?
The main one.
Yeah, you
Cordite's
just
the
think,
main
wow,
one,
not that. It's just really strange. So, I'm thankful that PTSD has not crippled me. I absolutely recognise people are crippled by it. I can balance my yin and yang in my own head, and I think that's ultimately saved me from a lot of pain. But which you would have seen people do. People do feel.
Yeah. It is crippling. I mean, PTSD is I interviewed a guy called Mark Gordon, Dr. Mark Gordon, and Mark is he's one of Joe Rogan's specialists.
Yeah.
Mark is a leading researcher and doctor who treats people with what you could describe suffering the effects of PTSD. Treats people with TBI injuries and blast TBIs. And Mark, I've interviewed him as well on here, so if anyone wants to go and look him up. Mark says that there isn't PTSD. He doesn't describe it as that. Mark would say that. Apologies if I'm misrepresenting you, Mark. Mark would say that PTSD is just a label, and it's a label that is attributed that people attribute to a set of symptoms, a set of impacts on people, and those impacts can be wildly different. Which is why, if we think of PTSD in the traditional way as a syndrome, which is why it impacts people in very, very different ways. I'm inclined to sort of agree with Mark, and I would say that PTSD is an indicator of the mechanism of injury. Yeah. It's an indicator of how these symptoms and this mental state that this individual is in came about, and it's made up of multiple different things at different levels, from physiological issues, to anxiety, depression, stress, things are almost like bipolar disorder sometimes, extreme emotional outbursts, positive or negative. And how did we come on to that? How the fuck did we come on to that?
There was about, PTSD I'm luckily that hasn't sort of affected me, but I think when you...
Short-term memory loss.
Yeah.
I just lost my train of thought completely. But how did we come on to that?
I think when you see things that you can't unsee, that are horrible things, absolutely, just like next level things, which we've both seen, you take a life, a little bit of your soul's chipped away. These are bad people, and no regrets about anything that we both did and those extreme circumstances within, but you can't come out the other side and be unaffected by it. It's how it affects you and what you let it affect it. I look at it as the long battle, is if I now let, and I'll say PTSD in inverted commas, affect me, I'm almost letting them go back to that time and letting them breach the wall, come across and then kill us all. And that's how I frame it in my head. But this is how
an interesting way of looking
at
it.
And I am, I am not very empathetic.
I've never heard it put like that before. Yeah.
I don't want them to win. They're not going to get in my head and cause me dramas. I can balance a lot of the stuff that we did, but you've got to affect that the stuff we did, the people we killed, indirectly and directly at close quarters, and the things we see affect you. You've got to put your hands up and go, yeah, 100% it has. It's how you will let it affect you. And I try and bat it off. I think is what I'm trying to say. Don't let them win.
I think for most people it doesn't affect them in a way that is noticeable.
Yeah.
Because there are absolutely people who listen to this now and going, you were talking shit.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm not bothered about anything I did.
And that was me 10 years ago. I'd have been, PTSD, you are weak.
Oh, were you one of those?
Yes.
Were you one of those?
100%. But looking back now, having left that part of the army, Ministry of Defence, I think you're swept up in that. And you'll know because you left. It almost gives you a different perspective. But you're so busy doing stuff that you just don't have time to think. And, I've never really reflected. I did 3 tours of Afghan. 2 were really good, really kinetic. One was last as the RQ, so less kinetic, not kinetic at all. And not really thought about it at all in the rounds. It's only recently when, we decided to do this podcast that I went back and had a look at it. And then all that stuff that you'd forgotten and just put in a box and stuff. I didn't have time to think. Leaving, that part of the army, it's given me time to reflect. And then you look back and then listening to podcasts, you think, oh yeah, your PTSD or whatever, your effect is manifested in you worrying about how you load the dishwasher. And I thought, oh, that's me. It's strange. It's just strange how that.
Sorry, that's where I was. I think that's where I was going with what Mark is saying. So, that example there of your OCD, I'm assuming you didn't have that before.
I probably did. I think you can't escape being in the army 30 years without a bit of it. But
probably.
But it's, I suppose how I don't know. That's difficult.
It's how emotionally charged it makes you when something goes wrong. Right? When something goes wrong.
Because at the end of the day, does it matter if the dishwasher's loaded in a certain way? Of course it doesn't. But 10 years ago, it would have absolutely. And was that effect? I think it was.
So these are just impacts of extreme trauma, right?
Yeah,
this is what it
absolutely.
is.
And you're right. I think PTSD is kind of the wrong label for it in my head.
I think it is a simple label that they can easily chuck and let you label something else, right? Now that is not. I absolutely do not want to dismiss people who have been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah,
it's. Myself in 2009 privately was diagnosed with it, and I don't think I've mentioned that on the podcast before, actually. And in fact, before I have said I've never been diagnosed with it before, and it's complete bullshit. And for some reason, I think it's partly, fucking weirdly, totally forgetting that I basically referred myself to a privately after the second tour of Afghan. And I think maybe as well, I sort of purged, got rid of that memory because I didn't want it.
I think I'm the same. I think,
and I think also because you don't get a certificate. It didn't go on my medical records because I went privately, done your fucking cheers and gone and I finished the program early because I was paying for it myself. And it's not cheap when you're paying privately.
That's good for you.
And the mad thing is I was paying for it privately when on camp, I was still in.
Yeah.
On camp, I could have just gone to the med centre, referred myself and gone straight into the whatever that department is in 16 Brigade and got treatment properly. In hindsight, maybe I should have done that.
Yeah.
Right. But so what I'm saying here is I don't want to take away from anybody who is absolutely diagnosed with PTSD and suffers.
100%. I'm the same, exactly the same, because it is out there. However you label it, it's out there.
Yeah, and it impacts people in a shitload of different ways, and the most common of those is anxiety, depression, flashbacks that I've never had. Fucking glad I've never had it, but there are other ways it does really impact me. Right. But like you said, I think we're lucky in that we're able to manage it in ways. So manage this. Let's go back a step. Manage the impacts of extreme stress and trauma that has been had on us. If that with you is what the OCD is, right? Other people aren't so lucky.
No. Oh no.
And it always amazes me how differently people are impacted by the trauma. As we spoke earlier,
but by the same event as well. That's what really surprising. You can see that you can be 2 people on the same event. One could have catastrophic effects, and the other one just laugh it off. And they're the same people. It's just strange how, and you never judge unless you're there at that time. You can never judge what people, and I would never judge, people that have been there. It just affects people different ways. Yeah. Luckily, it hasn't affected me that badly. I don't think still that. But I'm naturally a calm person. I think that's helped. I don't really nothing really upsets me in the rounds, and even as a sergeant major, and I wasn't a screamy, shouty one. And I think that's why we ended up, you snipers, me in patrols, just because of the characters we were, just that calm-ish kind of.
Well, funny enough, when I went back to the rifle company and took over a platoon, I ended up changing my postponer there deliberately consciously because I felt like I needed to be something else.
But that's that golf
and I
club
became,
effect. Yeah.
like, at times, unnecessary. And I look back and I go, fuck, I should not have been like that.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily shouty.
Yeah.
If I felt like it was something that I needed to lose, I should lose my temper over this and go mental because someone has fucked up rightly.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with it in the way that I am now, a calm, rational person, I went over and shouted.
Too much.
It's one of those, you look back on like leadership and you go, I wish I'd done things a little bit differently. I could have done a little bit. That's one of those aspects. I think that is, well, for a bunch of different reasons. But I don't think you're going to get very far on periods of the military, like, that we served in, if you are a headless chicken.
No.
You're not going to get very far.
No, you're not.
So, and I think you lose a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think, throughout my career, and I try to remember what it was like to be those ranks below and how I like to be treated fairly and stuff. If people muck up, absolutely smash them. But a lot of people tend to just dissecate themselves and just like, in my day, it wasn't like that. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I try to remember what it was like to be in that Sanger when I was a Tom, and just to be in their shoes, and that serves you quite well in the decisions you make. And I found that in Musa Qaleh is just remember what it was like and the pressure they're under, because sometimes it's easy to be the sergeant major because you're not on that, you're not in that same world that they're under, the pressure they're under. Yeah. Different pressures, 100% different pressures, just different. Yeah.
I've got a shed load of questions here in the chat. So for people who are listening to this after the fact, this right now has been live streamed for platinum subscribers of the podcast, and they are chucking questions in the chat. So what I'll do is, Scriv, I'll jump onto these questions now. There are loads.
Yeah. Yep.
And then after that, if there's anything more that you wanted to cover, because you brought a load of notes.
I think we've covered a lot.
Preparation and research.
Yeah, no. OCD. Planning.
You go for that. Okay, right. Let's go from the top here. What proportion of the paras were exemplary under fire? What happens if a para, enlisted or officer, doesn't perform well?
It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. You can't put a metric on it, can you?
Well, what happens if someone underperforms?
So, depending who it is, I think they would get gripped by the section commander, next rank up.
Explain gripped for the civvy.
Straightened up.
Stern words. With or without violence.
Yeah, exactly. You do what it needs to take. So I think 1 off, 2 off, you're probably given the benefit of the doubt. If it happens a 3rd time, question. And I've seen people removed, including sergeant majors, on operations because they weren't cutting it. All ranks I've seen removed. So I think ultimately, if you're not performing, and it's about saving people's lives. If you're doing things that will put people at risk, you will be removed from post. Young private soldier would probably be straightened up by section commander, by hook or by crook, and be expected. A lot of it's education. A lot of the stuff is seeing a dead body for the first time, being under fire for the first time. You can't expect people just to take it like that. It takes a while to be battle inoculated.
Most do, though. This is what I was talking about earlier. It surprises me how capable.
And that's where your training needs to be as realistic as possible. And we learned that as we went. Sooner someone can see a dead body, soon as someone can be under contact on an operation, things go a lot smoother. It's when it drags itself out. You haven't seen a dead body. You haven't seen what a grenade does. You haven't fired around in anger. Sooner you do that, it all sort of shapes it out. Luckily, it doesn't happen very often, I don't think. Do you?
No.
Normally,
Well, but it happens more regularly for privates. The lower down the ranks you get, that happens more regularly because there are more of those.
Yeah. Proportionally, there's more of them.
Yeah.
But
and
then
and the quality is less consistent.
But you expect less of them. They just need to do what they're told.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not a lot, I think.
How have you changed, be it good or bad, from your deployments?
So I miss it, and I think you'll always miss it. So I think, what's the saying? I miss the clowns. I don't miss the circus. And I think that sums it up. So I miss it every day. The good things, it's given me what's important in life. You know, the little things that used to bug me don't bother me. You've only got one time on this planet. You know, that make it work and make it real, because you're not coming back again. And I think that, you know, when you see people like Tom Beckett who didn't see his daughter born, that's real shit. Whether you're late with a mortgage, whether you're, you know, whatever, you know, that's not important in the big scheme of things. I think it's given me perspective of what's important in life. And I can sit fairly contented with where I am in that. Are you the same? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
What's important is
definitely on perspective.
What's important in life.
Like we were talking about earlier. I think one of the ways it really impacted me, and early on was in a negative way, was that I would get really agitated if this is when I would come home after a tour, any of those tours, and for a period of time after, even when I had left the military. I would get really fucking agitated if someone else in my family, for example, was getting really agitated about something I perceived to be really small.
Yeah, you're right.
The boiler's gone, having a meltdown. Yeah, you really gonna have a meltdown about the fucking boiler going?
Yeah, I know.
You know, is it really drama? Going to be late for X, Y, or Z? I mean, getting late pisses me off. Being late, but you know, or anything like that, or like a financial hardship, things that it is normal to get agitated or upset about. But because my sort of what's the word? Not perspective. Yeah, my outlook on life and what I saw as what mattered and what didn't was so severely skewed. It was still in Afghan mode.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I carried that home. Yeah. It's like, well, you need to rebalance yourself here and recalibrate what matters and what doesn't.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what's important, what's not. And I found that was amplified on things like R&R, where you were literally 12 hours you were there, 12 hours you were back here, and then you were listening to someone in Starbucks whinge that their coffee wasn't hot. You know, that I would just want to just kill them.
Yeah.
And then you just had to go. And that was the difficult part. And then I think, so that was your sort of 10 days R&R, 2 weeks. And then when you came back for the end of the tour, that almost carried on until you got the normality of what you'd think would be normal. But in them days, we're back-to-back tours. So you didn't have much downtime before you were training for the next one. So you almost swept up in that, you know, the continuing, you know, conveyor belt of it all.
Yeah, I had a point where nothing mattered to me. Yeah. I literally would come back and nothing mattered. Nothing mattered to me. And all I wanted to do was get back out.
Yeah.
And that was whether I was on R&R or whether the tour was finished and we knew we had like a year maybe back in the UK or 9 months or whatever before we started next training. I just wanted to be back out because nothing else mattered at all. To echo what you said earlier on, maybe on the icebreaker, all I wanted was to get out and be doing the thing that I felt I was great at, and the thing where I felt I was most valuable, the thing where I felt I could make a real fucking difference and actually have a big impact on things. You know, my piece in the machine. Yeah. You know, I'm extremely proud of what I did and what I felt I was capable of, and the kind of soldier I was most of the time. There are times where I fucking really regret what I did or how I acted, and maybe minor to other people. To me, they're a major thing because you know it's like when you think that you could have done something better or you did something badly. You sort of attacking your own character, and quite rightly so in some circumstances. But I nothing mattered to me at all. It was a really difficult thing to try and manage because that comes across as a severe lack of empathy. It is a lack of empathy, and it comes across as you're heartless. Yeah. Totally heartless. Which you are. If you're in that position.
You know, my coping mechanism still to today is non empathy, almost cold-blooded, heartless, and you know, unless you're in my inner circle when I care about you deeply and all that kind of stuff. But that's how I've always done it. However, how I've coped with it, and that's what I've really found difficult is because I wanted to be on R&R with my family and see people, and then in the same breath, I wanted to be back out there because I boxed family up, put them away. I'll bring them out when I come back because for me it clouded the water. 100% professional. You had to be on it, and if you weren't on it, you'd be dead. You know, it's difficult.
I would never. If I had the choice, I would never have had R&R.
I wouldn't. I think it absolutely breaks the system. I think the amount of money back and forth, and ultimately, it's not good for you. You know, you want to be game face on.
I don't know about that, right? I don't know. I didn't want to leave the guys.
I didn't want to leave. That's what I said. Game face on. You know, my worst nightmare would have been gone on R&R. we didn't have R&I Musa Qaleh, so it didn't even affect us, is someone dying when I wasn't there, and I would have thought, if I'd have stayed, would they be alive? That horrible thought. Probably not. It doesn't. Probably just idle thinking.
Yeah. How do you cope with grief?
Box it up.
Yeah. Box it up.
Yeah.
What do you mean, box it up?
Just put it away. Don't know. So again, going back, and this is purely me, lack of empathy. So I don't have much grief in my life. I didn't have any grief over anything that happened in Afghanistan. Lost some really close friends. Nothing I could have done. And that's how I almost put it in a box and put it away. Don't really think about it. I think about Tom Beckett died this week on the 5th. You've got a couple of guys
the anniversary
died
this week, yeah.
Yeah, died on Sunday on the 9th. There's two guys with Conrad. A sniper. Again, cracking lads. I knew them all. I've got no grief over it because it's almost to me it's a wasted emotion because I couldn't have done anything. I wasn't there when I was in country, but not in the same place. When those two guys got hit by the sniper, I wasn't there. Even the guys at Musa Qaleh, there's nothing I could have done to save their lives. Good luck, bad luck. So almost wasted emotion. Will that come back and bite me? I don't think so, because it's 20 years now from those times. But, that's how I deal with it. I don't know, right or wrong.
Yeah,
I've never
grief is the ones that get me. The suicides, the ones that have really hit me.
Yeah, I think
the suicides.
Ones that hit me the most are, like you say, suicide, because you think, well, could I have reached out? And I'm not good at that, to do that. And wasted deaths like Andy Waddington's, which was just an accident. You think, what a waste of, they're the ones that hit me the most. And then when there's kids involved, like Tom Beckett never saw his daughter, that, it grates, and then John Hollingsworth, Hereford, his funeral, he had his 18-month child running around the coffin.
Oh my God.
Them bits that, not grief, never broken down in tears over anything like that. But, you're not human if it doesn't touch you.
Yeah.
It's just whether you let it affect you.
What was the biggest learning experience you had in the Paris?
Don't know.
How to load the dishwasher correctly.
Yeah. Learning experience. Don't know. I did 30 years in the end. Came out.
How many? 30?
30.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So, but then what you learn as a private soldier to when I came out as a major is totally different. You learn. So I think, to me, never stop learning all the way through. It's not, what you learn as a private soldier is different to what you learn as an OC, and then adapt. But then I think you bring, especially for me as a late entry officer, which means you've gone through the ranks and then commissioned, is to remember what's gone before. I have a saying is, if you've done well, send the elevator back down and look after those below you. Not everybody does that. No one's a threat below you. And if you see them as a threat, that's your own fault. Try and educate those ones below you. So that's probably my biggest sort of takeaway, is the organisation is bigger than the individual. The Paras hasn't stopped working since me and you left. It's probably got better. It's, there's always someone coming. There's always something you can pass on your experience, and don't stop caring for the blokes, probably.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I roll these into two questions into one. You can choose which one to answer. So, what is the worst mistake you've made while serving, or what is the hardest moment you've had while serving? So, worst mistake or hardest moment, or you can answer them both. It's up to you.
Yeah, I don't know. Worst mistake. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't know. I'm not very good at it.
I know one that we're not going to talk about on air.
Yeah.
An amusing one.
Yeah. I won't mention that one.
Don't mention that one.
What was the other part to it?
The hardest moment.
So, and again, I don't want to keep going back to that same thing, but I can remember Tom Beckett was killed, which probably hit me the hardest because he was in my peer group, slightly behind me, but in my peer group. I was RQ, he was Sergeant Major. Hearing that noise, and can you sort of bring it back? So when we were in the ops room, and if you were as well, when Kajaki played out,
yeah,
can you remember listening to that on the radio?
I knew all my guys' Zap numbers,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I was listening to Zap
that's
numbers.
what I
I
was going
heard
to say.
Stu Hales come through.
So,
Yeah.
you know, they don't, you know, for the audience, they don't say, you know, Scrivener, Keir is dead. They give you a Zap number, which is a regimental number and a couple of your initials.
They list out all the casualties over the
Yeah.
radio because they're
By
sending them,
Zap number.
they're sending them
Yeah.
back to Bastion
Yeah.
basically to get a Kazavat.
And for morale, you don't want Keir's dead.
No.
But ultimately, if you're any good, you know the Zap numbers of your guys. I did. And then as they played out in Kajaki, the Zap numbers came across, and I can remember clear as day going, I know that one. And you would have known Stu Hale, you know, because they were your guys. I knew Mark Wright, you know, all that kind of thing. And you play it out, and that hits you hard, doesn't it? You think, fucking hell, that's a nightmare. And then the same as when Tom, because I was RQ, so we had a morning brief, and I can remember it coming across to say, because we had
2010, wasn't it? 2011, 2011.
Yeah, 2011, February 11th.
February 2011, yeah.
Yeah, literally Wednesday, 14 years ago. I can remember his Zap number coming across, and he just like, gut check. But you're in a responsible position, RQ, senior warrant officer under the RSM, show no weakness and stuff. But you're like, Jesus, you know, Tom was a good mate, knew his wife, knew the situation around his wife being pregnant. He was about to take R&R. 2 weeks' time, she was born. It was, you know, just a nightmare. But life goes on, and that was probably the worst feeling. Sat around the morning briefing table as we did every morning, carrying on as normal, knowing your best muck has just died, and then having to go and identify his body and all that kind of dog shit. You're just like, and it comes back to what you said. What really matters? That matters.
Why did you have to identify the body?
Yeah, you have to. So, do you not know? So every death in Afghan, because it wasn't a war situation, had to go in front of a coroner. So it was a criminal
about
act.
the coroner bit, yeah.
Yeah. So as the evidence chain, because it's almost like a murder, you have to have the evidence chain of how he died. So that's why the RMPs are always involved.
I always wondered why I had to go to the coroner for a couple of things.
Yeah,
I wonder why I went.
Because it's not general war; it was an insurgency. So war was never declared in Afghan. So you had every death went to a coroner. So he needs the audit chain to say who it was, where it was. So every body, and I did a few, and I think myself and Richie Bilbao did. I can't even remember. Did Tom? But it's a funny story about that. Not funny, but funny. Yeah. So you had to identify the body with an RMP there and sign a witness statement to say that is Hugh Keir. So when Colin died, I think Richie Bilbao, he was like, that's Tom Beckett. And you could see the RMP go, because his name was Colin. Mm. We all called him Thomas Beckett. You just think, and then, you know, you could say, yeah, that's Tom Beckett. And they were like, thinking they'd mucked up the names and stuff. And he went, oh, no, what it is, we called him Tom while he's in the body bag, you know, with the thing open, looking at it. Again, absolutely surreal now. Yeah, you know, Colin Beckett. Mm. But evidential chain ultimately went back. All of them are unlawful death, unlawful killings normally, because it's not general war.
Yeah. I remember going to Dravers and Muirhead's coroners. Yeah. That explains why I went there. I never asked the question.
Yeah, because it's the evidence of how they were killed, not in general war.
Oh, here's a fucking deep one. Jesus Christ. I apologise in advance for this question.
I don't want to get PTSD now.
God.
Go on.
Oh, this has got me going, yeah. All right. For colleagues who died, what would you say to them if you could speak to them again? Jesus Christ.
Nothing. So I think it goes back to what we said. Was that, would you go back tomorrow to do what you did? I would 100%. And I think that going back is that part of that chance of being killed again. I don't think there's anyone that we know would change what they did. And that's really strange to say. They'd like to be alive, don't get me wrong, but they were doing their job, and all of them were doing it to 100% of what they did. The outcome was wrong, but even Tom, it's weird. I don't know to say it or not. So we had a mess do, and Tom Beckett said, I'm going to die on this next tour, to me and my wife. He knew, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change. you know, it was drunken talk, top table, and he goes, I've got a bad feeling about this next tour. So we'd done the 2 tours before, just about to go on Herrick 13 or whatever it was. And he said, I've got a bad feeling about this tour. And the reason I say that is because it didn't change anything he did. He was there for his company. He was a legend, you know, a Superman. And I've mentioned it on my sort of social media this week. He's to me, he was one of those immortal kind of people, like Sergeant Major should be, like I tried to aspire to be. That Superman that can never be killed. And I think it hit C Company hard because he's that kind of person. Do I think, obviously, he'd want to be alive? Would it have changed anything he did? No, I don't think so. He would have done exactly the same. It was that good luck and bad luck at the end that separated it. Because if you go into thinking, I don't want to be killed, it will change what you did.
Yeah.
Would you have been a coward, in inverted commas? Would you have gone on that patrol you didn't need to be? Would you have gone into the Sanger? You know, it's a strange question, and it's hard hitting. You know,
I don't think that thought of I'm going to get killed on this next tour is unusual for guys who did multiple tours like that.
Yeah,
and not just Afghan people who have experienced this in other types of conflicts, right? And the reason I say that is because I felt the same thing about the second tour.
Yeah,
I was convinced I wasn't coming back, and it was because I felt like I'd used up all my luck on the first tour.
Yeah. No, it's fun.
Especially where we were, you know. So I don't think it's unusual.
Yeah. Which
it's unusual to say out loud.
Yeah. No, that was it. I mean, I think it was a bit of beer talking and that kind of stuff. But to say it's strange, and that always hit me because he ended up dying. Yeah. If you'd have said it to me, and because you lived, it probably would never have stuck with me. But that always stuck. But in my mind, it never entered my head, and that was one of my strengths is you know, and again, not ticking the ego box as like, I knew I was pretty good at what I did and I would have had to fuck up if I died. That's how I looked at it. I'm too good. I'm not letting the Taliban win because I am a lot better than them, trained and all that kind of dog shit. So that's how I balanced it in my head. It's like, they're not killing me and they're never going to kill me. You know, I'm immortal. And then, you know, that's a stupid thing to say, but that's how I boxed it up in my head. And, you know, how I did it all. I didn't think about family when I was there. It was literally laser focus on the job of whatever that job was.
Yeah. Next question from Patreon, these platinum subscribers. Are you open about your war experience with civilian friends and family?
No.
Too late, mate. This has gone out publicly.
No, and I say no because it's 20 years since that. Yeah. I gave the request of the CO when I was RSM. We had guys deploying on a tour, and I said, "Can you give realities of war talk, basically about what happened?" That's the only time I've ever spoken about it. Since leaving the parachute regiment and moving on to the MOD, I found it easier to talk about, whether that's unboxing it, but yeah. And there's some stuff that you will know what happened in Musa Qaleh that I will never talk about. You know, it is the reality, the brutal reality of war. You know what I'm talking about. And it's no place to be unpacked because it won't help anyone. But you know what you saw. You know what you did. I know what I saw. I know what I did. You're almost on that border of, I don't want to say chivalry is the wrong word, but, you know, just that needing to do things that were hard to do, that line. You know, balancing that line, where that line is, I suppose. I'm sort of not saying that very well. They don't need to be said. That's for me to have in my head. I've balanced it all. I've never told family about it, never told friends, and there's no need to tell them. There's certain people, like really good friends, that I've told stuff, and that's it. But they are very close friends, kind of thing. You know, and you're one of them because you were there. And there's a couple more, but I think it doesn't serve to unpack that stuff. It doesn't mean anything, you know, to them, and I think it would cause more worry, especially straight after 2006. If I'd have come home and said, "Oh, I've fucking done this," and I'll tell you a story. I think I was sergeant major in charge of the screws mess, so the corporal's mess. You have a mess do. We invited him into the sergeant's mess, and I had a couple of guys come up to me and my wife, and was like, "Scriv he's mega, he's a hero, he saved our lives in Musa Qaleh," you know, that kind of thing. And you know, the people that were there.
Drunken banter. Not drunken banter, drunken like
and there was no
drunken
maliciousness in it.
talk,
But
yeah.
you know, the person I am, I was just so uncomfortable. I hadn't told my family what had happened. They'd only read the book a lot later on, and that book is good, but it's not, doesn't go into the detail, and it doesn't need to go into the detail. So yeah, it's difficult. And I was like, ooh, you know, feeling that, you know, I just don't like it when people say things about me that, you know, oh, he's a legend and he does this, he's done that, and oh, he saved my life, and you know, just like fuck off, you know. So yeah, I haven't spoken about it. I find it difficult to speak about, hence why I'm doing this 20 years later.
It's difficult to speak to people about this stuff who haven't ever been a part of the military for one, or ever been in that kind of, or any kind of like combat experience, right? Because what you perceive, or what I perceive in it, and same as you, say with most other people like this, is that you think they will never understand what I'm explaining, or the gravity of it, or I will never be able to explain it to a way to justify and explain exactly what we did. There's no way I could explain any of the stuff I did on any of the tours to a civvy, and they would understand exactly what that was like. No way I can do it.
That decision making is done in the here and now at the time when you did it. Trying to put perspective on it now, like we're trying to do today. A lot of those episodes, and we haven't spoken about some of the, you know, the down and dirty stuff because it doesn't need to be said. But even the stuff we have spoke about, trying to put perspective on it 20 years later, unless you're there at the time, it didn't make any sense, and it can come across really badly, I think.
Yeah.
If you try and do it, and that's the last thing, you know, you want to do.
If you had the opportunity to experience your deployments as a different rank or role,
yes,
100%. What rank or role would you choose?
Corporal. 100%.
I know why. Explain why.
Explain. So, you know, my career, 30 years, Afghan was probably...
It is the best rank, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is section commander.
Corporal, yeah.
My God.
No one fucks about with you. You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I was a sergeant major. So I did Iraq as a sergeant, which was good. Recce platoon, we got to do a thing, but Iraq was pretty dog shit in the rounds. I'd done Northern Ireland, but I was patrols, so not necessarily the good stuff. So yeah, I would go back as a full screw to do that. Section commander, patrol commander, it was the best job in the world. Yeah, but probably 8 or so, 10 years too late for me. But Musa Qaleh was so unique, I got to do a lot of stuff that a sergeant major shouldn't have done just by how we were. You know, throwing stuff and shooting stuff. You know, the sergeant major shouldn't be anywhere near it. But because of his lack of combat power, the amount of casualties we took, every man had to do it. And that was brilliant.
Yeah.
I think there's some video footage somewhere.
I'm trying to... Sorry, I've got a laptop malfunction. Yeah. Okay, so next question. Sorry, mate. I'm reading these off the screen for people listening. This is a good question. Would meditation or mindfulness practices have helped reduce the number of people breaking down?
Maybe. Don't know. Never experienced it. But looking back now...
Never experienced what?
Having that meditation, I don't know.
Okay.
Have you? Mindfulness? Maybe you have.
Well,
doing it. I don't know. What
mindfulness is...
reflection.
Mindfulness is just trying to... Mindfulness is like formally trying to make yourself more aware of why you feel what you feel, basically. And then meditate. Well, you know what meditation is. I meditate. I meditate regularly. Yeah.
No, I mean, it probably wouldn't. Have I done it? No. But probably, I think doing this has been good for my soul, just to unpack stuff.
Doing this what?
Podcast.
Oh, right, okay.
And it's the first one I've done. First time I've openly spoken about what happened in Musa Qaleh and all that kind of stuff. I think that's been good for my soul, and just unpacking stuff, putting stuff back in order, because it was muddy through my own fault, you know, too busy, all that kind of stuff. So it's been quite good just to unpack how things happened, talk it through, you know, a bit of prep for this. When we started talking about doing this, I think that's been good. Is that part of, you know, mindfulness? Probably. It's been good for me.
Yeah, it's a cathartic experience, right? And it's I think for things like this, or significant, like, you know, like life-changing events, which an operational tour can be or is, or, you know, or extreme circumstances. I think a lot of the time, if for a lot of people, that can exist like in your memory as a kind of, what was that? Is this thing happened? But what really was that? What did that mean? What was my part in it? What was my role? How did that impact me? And I think things like this, talking through it, well, I've said this a lot to people in the past. My favorite day of the week is recording the podcast, recording the interview.
Yeah.
And I said that early on, and early on is because every single one of my guests was ex-military.
Yeah.
And every single time it was like sitting down with one of the blokes, whether I knew them or not.
Yeah.
Common experience, common understanding, common experience, common understanding. I just, that catharsis of, I understand some of the stuff you've been through. Yeah. You understand what I mean through. And in this conversation, like if I was some civvy, it would be entirely different kettle of fish, right? It's a different kind of thing. So yeah, I know what you mean. And that's, not mindfulness, but it's, it's an exercise. It's not mindfulness, but I think meditation would definitely help. So. Or people understanding what mindfulness is.
I think the army is in a much better place than it was for that kind of stuff. Not there yet, but getting there. People. There's more help out there than there never used to be.
Okay, where's these questions? We've got. If you ever saw war crimes against the enemy.
Did I?
If you ever saw, would you have reported it?
So I think you've got to put Musa Qaleh in its own box. Not that any war crimes went on, but you're talking absolute life and death there. It was like, I'd say it, cracking film, no retreat, no surrender. That kind of, that ethos is, you had to do what you had to do. But there was no killing the prisoners, nothing like that. You know what I mean? But I'm careful what I say. We did what we needed to do. That's probably the...
I think he's saying more generally. If you've seen war crimes, would you report it?
Yeah, in the general, absolutely. And I think you've got to keep that moral high ground. You can't descend to the level of the enemy. You can't do that. You've got to keep that moral high ground. It's why the British Army is so good at what it does, because it has that moral high ground, and you've got to keep it. I think once you look into the abyss, I think there's that saying by Nishi, I think you look into that abyss for too long, something grabs hold of you and pulls you in. You need to stay above that. And yes. So being of that rank, Sergeant Major, absolutely.
What rank is the hardest to be in? This is we're almost at the end of the question, Joe. What rank's the hardest?
What do you reckon? Lance Jack.
The question's not for me, mate. What rank is the hardest?
They're all different, aren't they? So responsibility-wise, harder you go up, the higher you go up, the more responsibility you have. But actually, Lance Corporal is a horrible job.
It's difficult. I think it's either private or Lance Corporal.
Yeah,
I think it's either private
so.
or Lance
Bottom
Corporal,
of the pile. So I think it's Lance Corporal, because you are still down the bottom, but then you're heaped with a bit of responsibility. You're so close to the private soldier in age that it's difficult. I think as you go up, you could be more disconnected from what you're doing.
Yeah.
So as a sergeant major, you just pass on the message. Really, you could do. It doesn't have that ultimate effect. I don't know. Probably Lance Corporal.
Yeah. I agree. I hated Lance Corporal.
Yeah, horrible.
But for the additional reason that, this. So what is good practice and common practice is on promotion. When you get promoted, you should move the unit. Yeah. So if you're in company A company or B company, if you're in A company, you get promoted. Yeah. You should move from there to at least another company. Yeah. At the very least, another platoon.
Yes, 100%.
Or at least another company completely out, because you get to, because it's difficult to command your peer group, who you were just yesterday, you were all private friends together, having a fucking laugh on the piss, breaking all the rules in the world,
knowing all their secrets.
Next day, all of a sudden, you're senior to them, and you've got to get them doing stuff.
But that's what's hard with the specialist platoons, because you don't get that. If you're in sniper platoon and get promoted, you don't move as much, do you? Because you're the specialist.
It's different, right? It's different because in those specialist platoons, generally, everyone is already been in a few years. They're senior. They're there for a reason. Yeah. I can't speak for... Well, I can make assumptions, but I can't speak for, mortars, tanks, guns, SIGs, any of those. But I know snipers, people are there for a reason. They are generally better quality than their peers to be able to go there at the baseline level, right? Generally speaking.
No, you're
there
right.
are some people slip through the cracks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But so you don't really have this issue. But going back to Lance Jack, I ended up staying. I got promoted and stayed in my peer group in exactly the same platoon, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
A nightmare.
It's hard.
It was virtually impossible.
No,
it was misery.
Yeah.
It was misery. And it only changed when I moved the next year to the sniper platoon.
Yeah. And they flick and flack, don't they? Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. It is hard.
Do most paras respect the Taliban as soldiers? Oh no. I'm going to rephrase that. I'm going to say exactly what the question says. Do most paras respect the Taliban as fighters?
I think so. Grudgingly respect. I don't know.
I don't know. I
don't know, and it's I mean, I think it's a very difficult question to unpack. Is you got to respect them, and whatever the reason they're in, you got to respect their courage. You know, in our day, in the 2006 tour, before IEDs became, and I think that muddies the water. Before their change of tactics, we didn't have many IEDs in 2006, so it was mano. You know, I saw some brave stuff, killed some brave people. We all did. What you would say was brave. Is that begrudgingly respect? Yeah, probably. They were doing there. When they changed tactics to IEDs and stuff, which is quite cowardly way, but it's another way of war. I think lost a bit of respect for that. You know, they did different. Some of the people I saw at Musa Qaleh were brave people. And, is that respect? Yeah, probably. Especially against, the Apache and stuff. They didn't stand a chance with thermal and, it's like, but they still kept coming. You think? Don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen some good video footage of them just cutting around, knowing that stuff is watching them and still carrying on. Just think, oh. But is that really just, fanaticism taking over? Is that bravery? I don't know. Something.
There's been another question, and this is the last one I'm going to ask from the Platinum subscribers. Would you be willing to talk about your experiences on other podcasts? I know why he's asking this, because if you say yes, he's going to start. This is what happened to me.
Yeah.
He'll start referring you to other people and saying, this guy would be great for an interview.
Yeah, maybe. Don't know.
Yeah, or maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Is it yeah, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. See how this one goes. So in the back of my mind, and I've said to you right at the start, I am an introvert, very much introverted person. Found it hard to be in the army, and I think that's why I gravitated to sort of to the patrols world and that kind of world. It got easier with experience. Standing in when you QM and you're briefing 1,500 people. That's now naturally to me, but that didn't come naturally to me, and that is find it hard. So I did and ah about doing this podcast, and the thing that swung me was you. Because I trust you 100% and I know you watch your podcast, that kind of thing. So there was going to be no ambushes, no setting me up for failure, that kind of thing. And I wanted to be really careful that I didn't come across as an absolute idiot, egotistic. This is my story.
Hang on a minute. You referred to yourself as Superman multiple times.
No. That's the persona. That's the aura and the persona. And that's the difficulty I have to balance in my head. Is like
I joke.
So but you're right. That crossed my mind. Is that we did some extraordinary things in Musa Qaleh. I didn't want to become the Scriv show because it wasn't a Scriv show. Do you know what I mean? Because it wasn't. I was the Sergeant Major and extremely lucky to be there as a Sergeant Major. Loved it. Apart from the dying bit and stuff, brilliant. But maybe we'll talk fees.
They're the questions. There's a thank you in there from subscribers for asking answering the questions. And
good questions. Some hard hitting ones there.
Jesus Christ! I mean, when a question that I'm supposed to be asking you gets me welling up, like, oh my god!
I just thought you were weak.
No, the introvert thing's interesting. I describe myself as this, and people go, "What you're on? This is going to be, I think, episode 254." Yeah. But the reality is, I find it like you. I find I am uncomfortable talking about stuff I did.
Yeah.
I've done 2 interviews recently with American podcasts, and I find them uncomfortable. I find them uncomfortable when saying yes.
Yeah.
But I find them important because I think in talking about these things, you end up understanding yourself a bit more. And also, I think there are things that are important to important stories to convey. I think that's even more so important now, right? When you look at the period of like the operational tempo and sort of the way British forces are now, not the way, and the period the British forces are in now, I think hearing from as many people who have been there and done it, so for young guys and girls who are serving now to hear stories from people like yourself, I think it's super important.
Yeah.
It's one, okay, cool, interestingly, let's hear some war stories, but two, also on the point of reconciliation, understanding yourself, understanding what kind of things you may experience mentally and how people have dealt with those. That's why I started the podcast. It wasn't because let's fucking tell war stories and listen to people talking. It was because I wanted to help. I want other people to learn from this and be less likely of having a drama in their lives down the line. Because they heard Scriv talk about OCD. They heard Scriv talk about how he dealt with dead bodies, how he dealt with people getting lost, how he dealt with managing people under extreme stress. You know,
so I always say to people, and even, I remember saying it last week to someone, is again, this is my take on it. In warfare, from Agincourt to the stuff that's going on in Ukraine now, that last 6 foot has never changed. You need someone to close with the enemy and deal with him. Technology's changed, but that last 6 foot is about bravery, doing horrible things, nasty things. That's not changed. The weapons have changed, but their mentality and how you get people to that last 6 foot has not changed. And I'll stand by that, you know, because it hasn't. You know, you have to do that. You need someone on the ground to do that dirty business. You know, whether that's para-reg, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whoever's there has to do it. So, and I did think long and hard about doing a podcast. And one of the things that swung it with me, and you'll hopefully echo it, is that I think Musa Qaleh was voted, and I say it with a massive pinch of salt, was it the 6th greatest battle in British history? You know, and I say that, and I'm like cringe when I say it.
The Imperial War Museum,
did that. Or National Army Museum did it, and it was voted at the time, so it was flavour of the month and all that kind of stuff. But the story has never been told, really. We've had Adam's book, we had the Heroes of Helmand that serving soldiers weren't allowed to speak on, the TV program.
Do you know what's fucking crazy? No one of the 88 people got an award. No one of the dead got an award. No, nothing. No one got an award. And that mental.
So you know, for those listening,
you think about all the stuff that went on.
Do you know why? Because it's not malicious. Okay, so nobody in the Musa Qaleh battle got any award at all, and probably with you, I saw all the citations, including my own, including the CO wrote the OC up. There were some acts of bravery there that were unparalleled on that tour, not casting any dispersions. You saw it. There were some brave people there that did extraordinary things, and I'll just leave it at that. Unfortunately, 16 Brigade went home. Our citations were given to the next unit to process, and their process, it was in a different tour. So if the guys had been awarded what they deserved, it would have come off the next allocation. And it's not an allocation, but you know what I mean.
The next battle group that came in.
Yes.
Not three para.
So instead of going through 3 para, they went through the next unit. It doesn't matter who that was. There's no maliciousness in it. It was just like, well, these are not ours. And he didn't have the brigadier, anyone trumpeting those things. And there's people in Musa Qaleh that deserved probably
the fact that, I mean, at the very least, right, the fact that the OC walked away with nothing. Adam, nothing.
Nothing. And the extraordinary stuff that happened, you know, and I won't name names, but OC, JTAC, some of the mortar guys, you know, should have been decent medals, and they weren't. And do I regret that? Touch of bitterness, maybe. The recognition, and you know, probably
so. One of the things I struggled with when they came back, really struggled with actually. I hadn't thought about this before you came on. I haven't thought about this for a long time actually. One of the things that really impacted me after that tour, really negatively impacted me, I think it had a lasting effect, was it was a lack of recognition. Yeah. Now I'm not talking about medals or whatever, right? I mean that And it was, I mean, that we came back, as I recall, we landed in Stansted, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
We came back, because we came back after everyone else. It was like
Everyone-
an unusual passage back
Everyone
to
was on leave.
UK. Everyone was on leave.
Yeah.
I think B Company OC, mega bloke.
Yeah.
Giles.
Yeah,
Giles
Timms.
Timms.
Yeah.
Came and met us and
Yeah.
said, welcome back.
Yeah.
On the pan in Stansted,
Yeah.
airside. And then it was like, yeah, get on leave. And I thought,
Yeah. Hang on a minute. I'm like,
what? Is this,
yeah. It was
is this what?
strange end to
I
it
don't
all.
understand.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that,
Is there any, is this,
yeah.
I in hindsight, I think something like even just has been brought together and going, fucking hell,
Well
guys.
done. Yeah.
Like, well done for getting
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
Like, fucking well done. Just that small.
Yeah.
Right?
To
Not
me, it
because I
didn't-
want the gratitude.
No, it didn't top and tail it. I
But because
I
it-
think that tail
it
was
was
empty.
something so I experienced. That experience is so extreme for me, and so impactful.
Yeah.
Really was life changing. That couple of months in that
Yeah.
place was life changing for me. It really was. And I think in terms of trying to understand and reconcile that in my mind,
And
would have been helped a lot more if there had been a little tiny little pat on the back.
Yeah.
But at those times, if you remember, there was no Freedom of the City parades. All that came later.
Yeah, it came later
And
on.
it was the same for the three para guys that came back. It's probably the same for them.
No, there's no help
They
for
probably came back
heroes,
with straight on
nothing
leave.
like- yeah, yeah, no,
straight on
exactly.
leave. Like, yeah, cheers.
Yeah.
You've just done the most significant close quarter fighting
Yeah.
for extended period that's ever been seen since the Second World War with the Korean War.
Yeah.
Get on leave by
bye.
see you in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Right. No.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's absolutely
I can't be
surreal.
the only person that felt that.
No. I think you're right. It is almost an anticlimax, and I think that's why some people sort of struggle because there was no end to it. It was just like fizzled away, didn't it? Just like you're right. So I saw all the citations, including yours. I managed to get hold of mine, and it's on the wall on my office.
What? You son of a bitch.
All right, and then probably I shouldn't allowed to see it, but I did, and it's on my wall.
I didn't know I was cited.
Yeah. No, yeah, but and then where they went to, I don't know. Obviously, not very far because no one got anything. But
Adam must have him.
But maybe.
I've given him a call.
Yeah. But then, so my citation is on the wall, and I'm not saying this for any egotistic reason, and I don't want it to come across that. But people have read it and gone, "Wow, what did you get?" And I was like, "Fuck all." And they were like, "What?" But you did, and I was like, "Not my business," And I've got it there just as a reminder of that real life kind of, And I'm ultimately proud of everyone in Easy Company, what they did, and my small part in that battle, which was historically significant at the time, and I think hopefully will come out perhaps in the future. But yeah, you think a lot of people should have got a lot of stuff. The JTAC bringing in stuff, danger.
The Royal
clubs.
Irish guys were there before we even got there.
Yeah, exactly.
2 or
And
3
they
weeks
didn't
before.
get anything.
Even longer than what we were there for.
And it's very dangerous to do is then you start comparing. You read someone that did Herrick, whatever, Herrick 9. And you're like...
Victims of circumstance.
Yeah,
Victims
you're
of
like,
circumstance.
I did that before breakfast. Mega ego.
It's all relative though, isn't it? It's all relative.
It is.
All
And then
relative.
it's time, place, But what I think will sort of end that bit on is that there was some heroic people that did extraordinary things in Musa Qaleh. And it's sad that has been lost and not captured in great history, whether that's with official recognition. We know what happened. Hopefully things like this will bring people out. And I know we've been careful not to name names and stuff because it's just unhelpful on some
Yeah,
sense,
I tell you what I do. I tell you what I would like, and there's no way I'd know about this unless someone contacted you or me, and that would be like you and I both know guys who are fucked.
Yeah.
Immediately after that,
Yeah.
absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
Like their world got turned upside down in the worst spot, like extreme PTSD.
Yeah.
And I hope something like this,
Yeah.
where listening to their muckers talk through it helps a little bit. Because I know things like this in the past have helped other people. Maybe that's the case. I don't know.
100%.
I'd like to think that.
And I know there's a couple of the Royal Irish lads that have taken their own lives on the back of what happened. And that is, as the Sergeant Major at the time is, if you are suffering, you need to reach out, whatever it is. And then people like us, and I'm the worst at it, reach back in and just make contact to make sure they're all right. Because, the worst thing I think, and you're letting the Taliban win, is if 20 years later you let something happen to one of your muckers and friends and stuff, just through lack of effort, lack of empathy, which is rich coming from me. But that, my taking this forward is to try and reach out to some people and, just see if they're okay, because there's suffering out there, and you've seen it, like horrendously.
Yeah.
And if it results in them taking their own lives, that's just criminal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Through lack of,
Yeah.
thing.
Scriv, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. This is the longest we've ever spoken, ever, and it's definitely the longest we've spoken since.
Oh, 100%.
Musa Qaleh.
Yeah. Well, I told you to get back on the ramparts after you bluffed your wound.
Anything you want to mention that we did mention?
No, I think personally this has just been extremely useful. I've enjoyed the build up to it and just the chats we've had and that kind of stuff. And I think as we move forward, it may be opening that door to just balancing more of the stuff in my head, in your head, and I think it's been useful.
I've got one of the Royal Irish guys coming in.
Yeah.
Date TBC, but he reached out to me before you reached out to me actually about maybe after about doing something. So he'll be in it. But yeah, no, I agree, mate. Hopefully, I'm glad you found it okay.
So I think the last thing we need to do is wish Jared a happy birthday.
Jared Cleary.
Yeah.
Jared
Absolute
Cleary.
Legend.
Musa Qaleh sniper extraordinaire.
Who was
it's his birthday, yeah.
2IC? What do you call him in the sniper world?
It's his birthday. Let's call him my 2IC. Let's call him Jared's my 2IC Musa Qaleh.
So
it's his birthday in, well, at the time of recording this is his birthday in 2 days' time.
Yeah,
but this will be going out after.
So he was your 2IC, able to IC, the one of only 2 snipers in Musa Qaleh. Did some good shit.
Yeah.
Cracking lad.
Yeah, excellent guy. Super guy.
A hero.
Happy birthday, Jared. Happy birthday, Jared.
Happy
See you soon. Sweet. Been a pleasure. Right. We are done.